is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Okay. About the movie The Woman King on today's show. All right, so welcome to those on Facebook and YouTube as well. Welcome to the Network show. It is Sunday, September 18th, 2022, and we are live. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We're broadcasting on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF here in Detroit, as well as on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. All right, so if you've seen some of my posts, like all this week, I've been posting about the movie The Woman King, which is set in 1823 in Dahomey in West Africa, with this modern day Benin. She's one of the producers of the film. Usually I don't go to see movies based upon like historical events, things like that, because none of these movies are 100% historically accurate. You can't name one of these movies that's 100% historically accurate. If you think it's historically accurate 100%, where did the script come from? Okay, somebody had to write the script. So if you actually understand the movie making process for movies in Hollywood, these are not documentaries. So to attack any of these movies because they're not 100% accurate is just stupid. That's just stupid. It means you have absolutely no understanding of Hollywood movies. What these movies should do is cause people to want to learn more about the subject and to research the subject. You can start by Googling the title of the movie. Because if you Google the title of the movie, then a number of articles will come up dealing with the history surrounding what you see in the film. Okay, and this is where historians come in. Okay, so I have a lot of information to share with you on today's show, dealing with some of the history surrounding what we saw in the film and separating fact from fiction. It's a fantastic movie. The crowd's cheering at the end as well. And to be quite honest with you, and I'm going to try hard not to give away like the movie, things like that. Okay. But anytime I can see Africans fighting against European enslavers, I'm there for that movie. Okay, not too many movies are like that. Okay, not too many movies are like that. And this is the first box office movie where you have the focus on the African female warriors of Dahomey, the Goji, also called the Ahosi. I've talked about them before in my lectures dealing with the film Black Panther. Okay, because the Dora Milaje that we see in the film Black Panther, those African female guards, those African female warriors that we see in the film Black Panther, the Dora Milaje are based upon the Agoji, the African female warriors that we see in the film. Okay, so we're going to talk about the film The Woman King and separate some fact from fiction. I'll give you some additional resources on that also. And then I want to talk about there's a good segment from Democracy Now! Dealing with Jamaica, Antigua, and Barbuda may cut ties to British Monarch, and they call for reparations for slavery. So there's a continued call to deal with the legacy of slavery and colonialism that Great Britain has participated in. And this fallout has come after the death of Queen Elizabeth II on September 8th. Okay, and more calls continue for this, and we're seeing more stories being written about this as well. All right, so there was a really good segment on Democracy Now, on a really good segment from Democracy Now, that dealt with this, so we want to talk about that also. Okay, I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered on Thursday instead of Friday. They called me on Thursday, asked me if I could come on Thursday. So I was on Thursday instead of Friday. So if you're looking for me on Friday, go back and watch Thursday's show. Okay. And there was a segment that we did dealing with the $105 million that's coming to Detroit to tear out I-375 freeway, okay, and to make it a boulevard, all right. And we know that I-375 freeway ran through Black Bottom in 1964, wiping out a lot of African American homes, and then also I-75 goes through Paradise Valley, which is an adjacent community, which was a business district and entertainment district, okay. So this is all part of the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. We talked about this on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and Reese Colbert was sitting in for Roland. So we're going to share that segment with you as well. Okay. And then we're going to be joined by Brother Nkosi, who is the founder of the African Math, AfricanMath.com. And we're going to learn more about African math and some of the history behind African math and its practical applications for African Americans today also. Okay, we'll talk about that as well. And we heard about Governor Ron DeSantis and Governor Greg Abbott, Ron DeSantis of Florida and Greg Abbott of Texas. We heard about them sending groups of migrants up to Washington, D.C., up to Martha's Vineyard, up to different cities up north, okay? And this is cruel and inhumane. They're lying to these people, telling them that jobs are waiting for you in a home and all different types of things like this are waiting for you, right? Well, there was a segment from MSNBC this week that dealt with reverse freedom rides. And this took place in 1962. There's been some articles written about this as well. Reverse freedom rides, where you had white supremacists who would bus African Americans and like civil rights activists, things like this. They would bust them up north and tell them that a job is waiting for you and a better way of life, etc. And that wasn't waiting for them. You know, the NAACP had to help out, things like this. This is cruel and inhumane. This is what these white supremacists are doing now. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Reverse freedom rides. This is what white supremacists did in 1962, and this is what many of them are doing now, because they don't have any policies to run on that are going to make people's lives better. So they are trying to win votes by inflicting cruelty on people, and this ties into the fear of the browning of America as well. So we'll talk about that as well. Okay. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or woman's thoughts, you control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. All right, calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. We're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, also. Okay, so I want to go to this first part, and I was trying to figure out really how I wanted to open today's show. But let's look at this here from this is dead.com. The Woman King rules um, with $19 million opening box office. Now, you had some people talking about absolutely no sense. 99 people talking about boycotting the movie, didn't see the movie. And I have 1 million followers on my Facebook fan page, the African History Network. I went through and looked at a ton of comments, probably comments the past few days. All the people who saw the movie had very good things to say about the movie. All the people who saw the movie had very good things to say about the movie. The only people who were criticizing the movie, people who didn't see the movie. That's why I said those people really need to be quiet and go see the movie. Okay, otherwise just stay quiet. You're talking about. But if we look at this article here from Deadline.com, the woman rules with $19 million opening after A+ cinema score. Sunday box office update. Now this is September 18th, 7:59 a.m. TriStar One's The Woman King higher than expected with a $19 million opening, boosted by lively word of mouth off an A+ cinema score and a massive 95% positive on ComScore, Screen Engine's post track. Friday, including $1.75 million previews, came in at 6.8 million, while Saturday pulled in 7.15 million. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. List to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your social media platforms. We're back in a few minutes, okay? Stand by. Back from break in 3 minutes. Back from break in 2 minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 2 minutes. Back from break in 1 minute. What the hell is this doing? on Facebook and YouTube. The computer's freezing up on me. I have to get a new laptop. This Dell, I'm telling you right now, was this Dell something like that? Yeah, okay. There's a good book called Fighting the Slave Trade by Sylvia Off. Trying to get the sister on the show. Okay, I emailed her a few years ago, and she was out of town when my show was in. Kanye West made his idiotic remarks about, and was out of the country at the time and couldn't come on the show. Emailed her yesterday, so I'm trying to get her on the show. Okay, so the movie did $19 million this week, despite calls, idiotic calls for a boycott of the film. And there's a lot of talk in the media about the involvement of Dahomey in the transatlantic slave trade, as well as, now they don't talk, because in the movie it shows them fighting against the Oyo Empire, or the Oyo Empire is in modern day Nigeria, as well as fighting Portuguese colonizers. And we know later in the 1890s they're going to fight against the French, or the Dahomey Wars, because they're going to be colonized by the French as well. Okay, so look here, just to try to set a tone. If we look at this piece here, this is a synopsis of the movie Fighting the Slave Trade by Sylvian Diop. And this sister, Dr. Sylvian Diop, this sister, historian of the African diaspora. She's the author of numerous books. But Fighting the Slave Trade came out in 2003. Okay. Fighting the Slave Trade, West African Strategies. Fighting the Slave Trade, West African Strategies. This is a synopsis at Amazon.com, but try to get it. If you can get it from an African American bookstore first, that's good. If not, then you can get it from Amazon. It says, while most studies of the slave trade focus on the volume of captives and on their ethnic origins, the question of how the Africans organized their familial and communal lives to resist and assail it, the transatlantic slave trade, has not received adequate attention. But our picture of the slave trade is incomplete. Our picture of the slave trade is incomplete without an examination of the ways in which men and women responded to the threat, and reality of enslavement and deportation. And we see this depicted in the movie. Slave Trade is the first book to explore systematic manner the strategies Africans used to protect and defend themselves and their communities from the onslaught of the transatlantic slave trade, and how they assailed it, and how they assaulted it. Because oftentimes they would trade in captives from a rival group, trade those with Europeans in exchange for rifles. So to better protect themselves from rival groups, but also to protect themselves from European colonizers also. In some cases, they're going to get cannons, because the Europeans are coming with cannons, and they're coming with rifles. They're coming with superior weapons. And many of these European colonizers are making ultimatums to these different African groups, these African ethnic groups. Either you provide us with captives, or we're going to take you and your people. This is something that Fighting the Slave Trade lays out. And if you study African history, you'll see this laid out. It challenges widely held myths of African passivity and general complicity in the trade, and shows that resistance and shows that resistance to enslavement and to involvement in the slave trade was much more pervasive than has been acknowledged by the orthodox interpretation of historical literature. Okay, it challenges widely held myths of African passivity and general complicity in the trade, and shows that resistance to enslavement and to involvement in the slave trade was much more pervasive than has been acknowledged by the orthodox interpretation of historical literature. Focused on West Africa, where the Oyo Empire was and Dahomey was, focused on West Africa, the essays collected here examine in detail the defensive, protective, and offensive strategies of individuals, families, communities, and states. In chapters discussing the manipulation of the environment, resettlement, the redemption of captives, as we see displayed in the movie The Woman King, the redemption of captives, the transformation of social relations, political centralization, marriage, as well, violent assaults on ships and entrepots, shipboard revolts like Amistad, 1839 Amistad slave ship rebellion, and controlled, this is extremely important, and controlled participation in the slave trade as a way to procure the means to attack it, like getting weapons from Europeans to be able to fight back as well. And you had to, and when you go study this history, they have to defend themselves from other African ethnic groups many times, as well as European enslavers. Fighting the slave trade presents a much more complete picture of the West African slave trade than has previously been available. So this book came out in 2003. There may be other books that you like better that go deep into this history. I'm working to get the author on the show so we can get deeper into this history as well. I had a conversation with one of my teachers, Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, today as well. We had a really good conversation. I was driving back from the movie, okay, and we're gonna try to get him on the show in the next couple of weeks as well to deal with some, like maybe some history surrounding this. He hasn't seen the movie, but maybe dealing with some history surrounding this topic also. Okay, now if we look here at this is what I want to do. Okay, we're coming up on a break. I want to go to this clip here. Viola Davis was on Good Morning America. We're going to clip one, Giovanni. Viola Davis was on Good Morning America, September 13th, 2022, talking about the movie The Woman King and some of the history surrounding it. No, the movie's not 100% historically accurate. No movie is 100% historically accurate, period. You can't name one. Okay, let's go to clip number one, Giovanni. Okay, we're going to break early. All right, we'll do this on the other side of the break. The African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Okay, stand by, everybody. Stand by. Bathroom break in 4 minutes. Bathroom break in 4 minutes. Just a second here. Bathroom break in 4 minutes. Here's the link to Fighting the Slave Trade by Sylvian Diop. DIOUF. Bathroom break in 3 minutes. All right, we got Mark, we've got Emma, a few of the people watching. Also, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $sign the AHN show through Cash App, $sign the AHN show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Stand by. Back from breaking. Back from break in 1 minute. Stand by, everybody. We're on a mandatory commercial break. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, September 18th, 2022, and we are live. Calling numbers 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 is the call-in comment. Okay, we're talking about the movie The Woman King. It did over $19 million this weekend. It should come in number one. Okay, it should come in number one also. I want to go to this clip here. Viola Davis, who stars in the film, is General Naniska, which is his character. She was on Good Morning America on early this week. And I want to go to that clip. Let's go to clip number one, please, Giovanni.
This is a movement. This is so much more than just a movie. And you even talked about it being so important to you and just that zenith for you.
That sort of magnum opus, I call it.
Yeah.
I think the same reaction that you have as an audience is the reason why I did the movie. First of all, it is a movie that's led by women. And it's a movie that's led by Black women. And it's a movie that's led by dark-skinned Black women. There is no white savior, you know, and it's women who are warriors, tapping into not only their physical strength, but also when you see the movie, they're humanized. And so, when have you seen that, ever? I remember someone online said, I'm tired of seeing dark-skinned Black women. It's just strong and fighting and masculine. And I was like, when have you ever? We do now.
And what a cast you've put together to tell this story.
Absolutely. Tuso Bedu, Lashana Lynch, Sheila Etin, you know, Adrian Warren, who was in Tina Turner, you know, as well as Sia, Shioma, Jamie Lawson, women who are beyond the brilliant. But also, I mean, women who are playing roles of our Goji warriors, that literally it could have been an action film. But when they walked in, you see people. You see humans. And I think that's what shifts.
You bring out the best in people because the critics are saying this cast, everyone in every single role, the best.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, here's the thing. You know, as a woman, you're taught that being a girl and being feminine is not about tapping into your physical strength. It's about being demure, speaking in a high voice, being polite all the time. Whereas the challenge of, the reason why I loved it so much is my body served me. And it was, I had to do 5 hours of lifting and martial arts every day.
Was that all new for you?
But you did martial arts, you did weightlifting, you did sprinting, you did weapons training, but you also had to take a DNA test.
DNA test, which I didn't want to see. I didn't want to see lactose intolerant, injury. I said I can't eat sugar. I mean, and I had to keep telling Gina, Prince Bicewood, great director. I had to keep calling her and say, Gina, listen to me now. You know I'm 56. You know if I get on that treadmill at 9.4, I lose oxygen. If I get 9.4, I could die of a heart attack, Gina. These girls are 30 years old. Gina, you got to do something else. You got to do something else. You're going to have a dead warrior here. Let's give everybody a laugh. The one that they gave you away.
And you're all superhero warriors on the big screen. This is the actual all-female army. Tell us about this. This is a true thing.
The Goji, the colonizers' name is the Amazons, but they were women who were recruited from the age of 8 and 14 in Dahomey, West Africa, which is now Benin. And they were women who were not considered beautiful, so no one wanted to, they weren't marriage material. They were unruly. No one can control them. And so they were sort of sold into the kingdom as Goji. They had to fight for their kingdom, all military units. They could not have children. They could not have, they could not get married, and they could not have sex. They had to train all day into the night, martial arts. They even had to literally walk over or crawl over acacia trees, which are just thorns, and show no pain whatsoever. But what's interesting is, as restrictive as that is, they took great pride in what they did, because you know what? It made them matter. It gave them a purpose. And if they walked away from it and said they did not want to fight, they would be beheaded, a lot of them, or killed. And this is true history. There's only actually one book out there about the Goji, which is the Amazons of the Black Sparta, which is part information, great reference book, and partly really painfully offensive, calling these dark-skinned women bestial and ugly. And you know what? When I say that this is my magnum opus, this is my gift to the 6-year-old Viola, who was always called black and ugly. That 6-year-old girl that was always running from the bullies. This is me sort of reaching back to her and saying, look, you matter. And you surviving and you being tough, you keep being tough. That sort of affirmation, a purpose. And it literally, it's going to be transformative, I think, for even white men, white women. type. But I feel for that dark-skinned woman who's been fed that cultural and personal narrative of being invisible. Let me tell you something. You're going to be seen in this.
Well, it's impossible not to see this movie. I know, really, really. And and when you see this movie, I feel that you're going to try and determine what type of warrior are you, because there are different types. And you did this great thing online, which I took the quiz. You take a quiz, and you can, depending on what you put in, will determine the type of warrior you are to one of the characters. Just knowing us, just knowing us, what kind of, who do you think we are?
Well, I don't really know you, but I'm going to say you're Naniska. Now, when you were playing football, I would say you probably were a Zogi.
Hey, once it's in there, it's never gone. I need to calm down a little bit, but it's still there.
You may be a Mensa, too.
A Mensa?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm going to go take the test. I took the test.
Like, what are you?
I'm a Mensa.
A Mensa is spiritual.
Yeah, didn't you? And not afraid to use it.
So you two are praying over people, and I'm out there fighting.
Teamwork. Thank you for this morning.
Yes.
Thank you for your words. Thank you for your message, and it's incredibly powerful.
Thank you very much.
And the Woman King, I'm so glad about this. It is exclusively in movie theaters, and you want to see it on the big screen, and you will on Friday. Well, hey there,
Okay,
GMA.
pause right there. Pause right there, Giovanni. Thank you. Okay. So that was from Good Morning America. I think that was from September 13th. I think it was. I'm having problems with Microsoft Word. That out on Good Morning America's YouTube channel. Okay. So copyright section 107 of the Copyright Usage Act law. Now, one of the themes that's in the movie, and I came movie, and I'm going to go through my notes also, but I want to go through some history of Dahomey here in just a second. One of the themes in the movie that we see is African spirituality, and we see like Ogun referred to, that is a Orisha from the Yoruba, from Ifa. We see African spirituality referenced throughout the film, okay, which is extremely important. So when she talked about spirituality, we see this referenced in the film. Okay, now if we look here, a quick synopsis of the movie. Now this is at the website, thewomanking.movie, thewomanking.movie. Those watching on Facebook and YouTube, let me know if I'm coming through all right. I gotta get I have to get Microsoft Word is giving me problems. I don't know what's wrong. I gotta get rid of this laptop. This is the one that went down on me after like a year, and I had to send it in to Dell. Luckily, I had the 4-year. I bought the 4-year extended warranty on this thing. Otherwise, I would have been in trouble. If we look here at the website, thewomanking.movie, this is the official website for it. The Woman King is the remarkable story of the Goji, the all-female unit of warriors who protected the African kingdom of Dahomey in the 1800s with skills and a fierceness unlike anything the world has ever seen. Inspired by true events, the Woman King follows the emotionally epic journey of General Naniska, played by Oscar winner Viola Davis. Now, General Naniska did not historically exist. There was a Goji named Naniska. The whole concept of General Naniska and probably her thoughts and things like that, there's probably a composite character, which we'll talk about. Composite characters happen oftentimes in films when you have a fictitious character that's created. As she trains the next generation, the Woman King follows the emotionally epic journey of General Naniska as she trains the next generation of recruits and readies them for battle against an enemy determined to destroy their way of life. Some things are worth fighting for. It's directed by Gina Prince Bythewood, who is African American. I know she's light skinned, but she is African American. She directed Love and Basketball. Story by Maria Bello and Dana Stevens. They're two white women, and produced by Kathy Schulman. Viola Davis, Julius Tenen, and Maria Bello. Okay. And the movie stars Viola Davis, Thusu Bedu, LaShawn Lynch, Sheila Atem, Hero Fiennes Tiffin, and John Boyega as King Gezo. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Stand by, bathroom break in 4 minutes. Bathroom break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Bathroom break in 3 minutes.
Deals with a number of different topics here on the African History Network, current events and history and much, much more. We're going to give you an update on what's going on. This is about self-preservation. We have to extinguish the fire of white supremacy. See, that's what's our consequences. Catch it all right here on 910 AM Superstation.
Balance of nature.
History Network show right here on 910 Nation, the Future Radio. Okay, I'm gonna go to this piece here. So we just looked at synopsis of the movie. I want to look at this. There's a really good article from SmithsonianMag.com, official website of the Smithsonian Institute. The warriors behind the Woman King. The warriors behind the Woman King. And this article came out September 15th. This article came out September 15th, 2022. Okay, September 15th, 22. The name of the book is Fighting the Slave Trade, West Africa, by Sylvie Diouf. Sylbiane, one N, Diouf. Fighting the Slave Trade. I'm working to get her on the show. Okay, so this is a really, really good article that helps to separate fact from fiction, dealing with what we see in the movie. And once again, none of these movies are 100% accurate. I notice you got people talking about boycotting these movies, things like this. They don't say that about the white movies that deal with history. Only movies that deal with African history, African American history. Those are the only ones that say. The movie Rosewood, okay, starring Ving Rhames, and the role that Ving Rhames played, the role of Man, okay, the former, I think it was a Civil War veteran. That's a fictitious character. Man did not historically exist. Man was probably a composite character, which is a compilation of different actions that different real people did, but Man did not exist. Okay, when you look at the movie Panther, the movie Panther, directed by Mario Van Peebles and Melvin Van Peebles, came out in 1995, about the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Okay, the main character, the character that Kadeem Hardison from A Different World played, Dwayne Wayne, that character doesn't exist. He's a fictitious character. And Melvin Van Peebles was interviewed, Mario Van Peebles, the son, was interviewed by Charlie Rose on PBS and explained why they did it that way. So composite character, because he said, if you you see what takes place through the eyes of this fictitious character, they take you throughout historical events, but you see what happens through the eyes of this fictitious character, and they'll study the different thought processes, different people from those different periods of time, and they'll take the ideas, the thoughts, things like this of different real life people and put it into a composite fictitious character. These are Hollywood movies. These are not documentaries. I'm in 7 documentaries. I know the difference between a documentary and a Hollywood movie. Hollywood movies are not documentaries. None of them are 100% accurate. You can't name one unless it is a movie. And because the question is, where does the script come from? How do they get the words to put into the mouths of the characters? Where does the script come from? The script is made up. And what they do is they go study the period. They read different books. They study the period. They bring in historical consultants on that period of time. And they formulate different characters based upon ideas at the time that represent that type of character. One of the historical consultants on the movie, The Woman King, his name is Leonard Ratchekon, Wantchekon. I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's a professor of politics and international affairs at Princeton University. He was also a historical advisor on the film. He's finishing up a book containing biographies of more than 50 of the Goji, the real Goji, 50 real Goji warriors. And his book is based upon interviews with their descendants and communities. He said, I think it's something when even today, I think it's something which is evolutionary, because all the training preparation it took is actually something that happened, is not made up. That's true. The training, all that is not made up. Now, different events, different things that people say. See, this is why people in TM, before you come here with stupidity, you need to go do research. I ain't one of these other people you watch on social media. I'm somebody who's a historian and actually knows what he's talking about. One of my teachers is Professor James Small, who's the historical consultant on the TV show Godfather of Harlem, which starts out in 1963 and it focuses on Malcolm X, Bumpy Johnson, and Adam Clayton Powell in Harlem. When you look at the credits, you see Professor James Small. He's one of my teachers. We've had him here on the show numerous times. So you need to know what you're talking about, TM. You don't want me to show your comment here and make you look stupid. Now, if we look at this article here, The Real Warriors Behind the Woman King, a new film stars Viola Davis as the leader of the Goji, also known as the Ahosi or the Mino, okay, the king's wives, the all-women army of the African kingdom of Dahomey. This is written by Milan Sawley, associate editor, history for Smithsonian Mags, Smithsonian Institute. So it starts out at its height in the 1840s. The West African kingdom of Dahomey boasted an army so fierce that its enemies spoke of its prodigious bravery. The 6,000 strong, in their estimates at its height between 6,000 to 5,000. It starts out at about 600. The first written information about the Goji is around 1729, but they're going to grow to their height of between 6,000 to 15,000 warriors, depending upon which sources you look at. Boasted an army so fierce that its enemies spoke of its prodigious bravery. The 6,000 strong force, known as the Goji, raided villages under cover of darkness, took captives and slashed off resistors' heads to return to their king as trophies of war. Through these actions, the Goji established Dahomey's preeminence over neighboring kingdoms and became known by European visitors as Amazons due to their similarities to the warrior women of Greek mythology. Okay, now The Woman King, a new movie starring Viola Davis. Let's see how large we can blow this up. Okay, The Woman King, starring a new movie starring Viola Davis as a fictionalized leader of the Goji. And oftentimes when you see different movies, Hollywood movies, because these are not documentaries, they'll have fictitious characters that are composite characters. And Naniska is a real Goji warrior, but it is not, she wasn't a general, okay? And it appears that Viola Davis's character was not based upon the real, generally speaking, the real Naniska, because Naniska was not a general. Fictionalized leader of the Goji tells the story of this all-woman fighting force, directed by Gina Prince Bythewood, who is African-American. The film takes place as conflict engulfs the region, and the specter of European colonization looms ominously. It represents the first time that the American film industry has dramatized the compelling story. We'll continue this on the other side of the break and separate fact from fiction. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. In the movie Harriet, the role that Janae Monáe played was a composite character. People don't go research these movies. She's a real character. She's an abolitionist. She embodies the actions of different abolitionists. These are composite characters. That's common practice when you make Hollywood movies. So people really should do research and stop all this nonsense. Stop all this talking on social media. They really should do research. Some liked the Harriet movie with okay, back from break in 3 minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 3 minutes, everybody. Share this broadcasting on social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. Shout out to everybody watching this on social media. Nakim Makua. And we've got Matthew. Martisha Patterson. How you doing, Martisha? Yeah, she said like Shorty Jarvis in the film Malcolm X. Well, Shorty was real, but in the movie Malcolm X, that's a good example. The movie Malcolm X, Brother Baines didn't exist. Brother Baines was a composite character. Brother Baines, he was a composite character of John Bembry. John Bembry was the real life prisoner who was an older prisoner in prison with Malcolm, who encouraged Malcolm to read and educate himself before Malcolm was exposed to the Nation of Islam. So Brother Baines is a composite character of different real life people. One of them would be John Bembry, but you have to actually understand history and understand the history behind the Malcolm X movie to even know who the hell John Bembry is. Most people don't know this. Brother Baines didn't exist. But there were people who were jealous of Malcolm in the nation, different things like that. But Brother Baines' character didn't exist. People didn't jump all over the movie with Malcolm X. Oh, this is not factual. This ain't real history. Man, sit your stupid ass down with that nonsense.
See, lessons have consequences. Catch it all right here on 910 AM Superstation, WFDF Farmington Hills, Detroit. 910 AM Superstation, a division of Adele Media. The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 910 AM Superstation or Adele Media.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Okay, as I was explaining during the break, the movie Malcolm X, that movie wasn't 100% historically accurate. You had some people that talked about that some then, but they, generally speaking, people didn't just trash the movie. I don't remember anybody saying, oh, we need to boycott the movie. Now, you didn't have social media like you have it today. That movie came out in 92. That was before Google even was invented. Google wasn't created till 1995. And YouTube wasn't created till 2005. But the character of Brother Baines in the movie Malcolm X, Brother Baines didn't even exist. Brother Baines was a composite character. This is commonplace in Hollywood movies. When you deal with like historical events and historical people, Brother Baines didn't exist. Brother Baines is a composite of John Bembry. John Bembry, Bembry, was the older African-American prisoner who encouraged Malcolm Little, okay, who becomes Malcolm X, encouraged him to study and educate himself and to read while he's in prison. This was before Malcolm was exposed to the Nation of Islam and the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad by his siblings. That's John Bembry. But you have to understand history enough to even understand who the hell John Bembry is and the significance of him and the fact that Brother Baines in the movie Malcolm X didn't exist. He was a composite character. So there's a lot of composite characters in these movies that people watch that deal with history. They don't know enough about history to understand that what they're seeing isn't real. Like the character of Man in the movie Rosewood that Bing Raines played. He didn't exist. Okay, let's go back to this article here from SmithsonianMag.com. Deals with the real women warriors of Dahomey. Okay, so as the Hollywood Reporter's Rebecca Keegan writes, the Woman King is the product of 1,000 battles. And they had a good article dealing with what they went through to make this movie. Okay, how hard it was to get this movie made, how this is not the type of movie Hollywood wants to make. It's not. I know you got people, all these dumbass conspiracy theorists out there. This is a plot, this is an agenda. Sit your monkey ass down with that nonsense. You have no idea how hard it was to get this movie made. When you got you have black, dark-skinned black women killing white colonizers, and you think this is a movie Hollywood wanted to make? You smoking crack. The Woman King is the product of 1,000 battles fought by Davis and Gina Prince Bythewood, both of whom have spoken out about the obstacles the production team faced when pitching a historical epic centered on strong black women. Now, some people are scared of strong black women. Some men are scared of strong black women because they're afraid they're gonna whoop their ass. That's why. Okay, some people are afraid of strong black women. You got some white people afraid of strong black women. Okay, I'm not afraid of that because we have African female warriors throughout our history. Quote, the part of the movie that we love is also the part of the movie that is terrifying Hollywood. the part of the movie that we love is also the part of the movie that is terrifying to Hollywood, which is it's different, it's new. Viola Davis tells Keegan in the Hollywood Reporter article, we don't always want different or new unless you have a big star attached, a big male star. Hollywood studios like it when women are pretty and blonde, or close to pretty and blonde. All of these women are dark and they're beating men. So there you go. They're beating white men too and killing them too. Just so y'all know, maybe that's an added incentive for some people that want to see that. Anytime I can see Africans fighting against colonizers and enslavers, oh, I'm there. From the origins of the Goji to Dahomey's eventual fate, here's what you need to know about the true history behind the Woman King ahead of its arrival in theaters on September 16th. Now, is this Woman King based on a true story? I would say it's loosely based. There's extensive dramatic license, which a lot of movies have. A lot of movies have extensive dramatic license. This is why normally I don't go see a lot of historically based films, okay? This is why I don't go see a lot of historically based films. Now, I don't say don't make it, things like this. I say we need to deal with the real history. We need to deal with the real history of these behind the movies. And this is the conversation I had with one of my teachers, Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene today. I said, we have to teach, this is the role of historians. We have to teach the real history behind this, expose this to people. Say, this is what you saw in the film, okay? This is what's true in the film. This is what's false in the film. You don't have to attack the film. You don't have to degrade it, things like this. Say, okay, this was the movie. This was Hollywood. Now here's the real history. Here's what we learned from this, okay? Now, somebody who's very special to me just sent me a text message. She asked a question. Why are some black men being cold or indifferent to this movie? Because some black men are cold and indifferent to black women. Unfortunately, now what I say may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. And if you may disagree with it or not, don't like it, but I can prove it. Unfortunately, oftentimes we deal with white male patriarchy dressed up in a red, black, and green dashiki. Oftentimes we deal with white male patriarchy because we've all been internalized by white supremacy to various degrees. And we take those white supremacy ideologies, we take it into the church, we take it into our civil rights organizations, we take it into some of us take it into the different communities, the conscious community, what have you, to varying degrees. It's not everybody. It's not everybody. Some people can change. They talk to sisters and see another perspective and change their ways. Some people don't. But a lot of that's what you're dealing with, okay? And we have to understand that and see ourselves as equals, as opposed to seeing African women as people to be subjugated, okay? People to be oppressed. Because unfortunately, because this is what Europeans do to their women, and this is what Europeans did to us during slavery and did to African women during slavery. Okay, so we have to understand that. A lot of times we take that programming. Okay, a lot of times we take that programming into our different organizations, into our different movements. And to be quite honest with you, this was a problem with the modern day civil rights movement. Dr. King was a sexist. Dr. King was a sexist. Now Dr. King was a revolutionary. And if you don't think Dr. King was a revolutionary, you never read any of Dr. King's books. You need to read Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. Okay. Also, read this book right here, This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed, by Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr., because it talked about Dr. King owning guns in here. And also Dr. King tried to get a concealed pistol license in 1956 during the Montgomery bus boycott, because we know his house was firebombed twice in 1956. But he was a sexist who did not think that African-American women belonged in leadership positions, permanent leadership positions in the movement. This is why Ella Baker is going to leave Southern Christian Leadership Conference, okay, which she co-founded in 1957 along with Dr. King. This is why Ella Baker leaves, okay? This book right here, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. And the modern day civil rights movement was largely led by African-American male Protestant ministers, and misogyny is all throughout Christianity. And then they brought that misogyny into the modern day civil rights movement. This is not an attack on them. This is something that John Lewis has talked about. John Lewis was there. This is something, and John Lewis said a lot of people don't want to deal with this. We see this with William Monroe Trotter, okay? And William Monroe Trotter did not think the Afro-American League, founded about 1898, William Monroe Trotter and Dr. W.B. Du Bois and Ida B. Wells, and William Monroe Trotter was a great man, but he was a sexist. He was a misogynist. He did not think African women belonged in those organizations, okay? Ida B. Wells wasn't having that, okay? This has been a problem in our organizations, in our communities. Okay, you read this book right here. Martin Malcolm in America, A Dream or a Nightmare by James H. Cone. You think Dr. King was a punk? You haven't read anything on Dr. King. Dr. King was a revolutionary. And what this book deals with, James H. Cone is the father of Black liberation theology. What this book goes through and breaks down is toward the end of both of their lives, their ideologies were converging. Malcolm is sounding like Dr. King. Dr. King sounded like Malcolm. Malcolm Lee, when he officially separates from the Nation of Islam, March 8th, 1964, Malcolm joins the civil rights movement. And if you actually read the Battle of the Bullet, which he first delivers March 29th, 1964 in Washington Heights, New York, 3 days after he meets Dr. King for the first and only time, March 26, 1964, at the U.S. Senate debate for the Civil Rights Act, if you actually read it, don't listen to excerpts, read the entire speech. Malcolm is talking about injecting Black nationalism into the civil rights movement. This is what he's talking about. And he's talking about registering African Americans in Harlem, New York to vote as independents. And then April 3rd, 1964, he delivers the speech at Corey Methodist Church in Cleveland, Ohio. And then April 4th, 1964, he delivers the speech at King Solomon Baptist Church here in Detroit. We got to go through and read speeches from Dr. King and Malcolm. Don't just sit up there listening. Don't just sit up there listening to the audio or speeches. You got to read it and analyze and study these speeches. Okay, now back to the subject at hand. Also, be sure to register for the online classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays, because we get deep into this information. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. It's an 8-week online course. Okay, we'll come back to can I say your name on the air? We'll come back to you. She sent me another question. Okay, we'll come back to you in just a second here. Just give me a minute. I want to go back to this article. Okay, now, in short, yes. Okay, so the question was, is the woman king based on a true story? In short, yes, but with extensive dramatic license. I agree with that. Okay, though the broad strokes of the film are historically accurate, the majority of its characters are fictional, including Viola Davis, Naniska, and Thusu Bedu's Nawi. Now, Nawi, it was a real warrior. I've read a ton of information on this. Nawi was a real warrior, but there's no evidence that the character of Nawi was based upon the real Nawi, who was an Goji warrior. Okay. And Nawi, she lives into the mid to late 20, I think it's about 1979. The real Nawi lives to about 1979 or so. Okay. Naniska and Nawi share names with documented members of the Goji, but are not exact mirrors of these women. King Gezo was a real king, okay, and he was involved in the slave trade, things like this. But at the same time, the Dahomey has to pay tribute to the Oyo Empire, which was made up of Yoruba, which is in modern day Nigeria, and we see this depicted in the film also. Okay, so you have multiple things happening at the same time. They're fighting other African other African ethnic groups, and fighting against Europeans. King Gezo, played by John Boyega, is the exception, according to Lynn Ellsworth Larson, an architectural historian who studies gender dynamics in Dahomey. Gezo reigned 1818 to 1859, and his son Gleli reigned 1858 to 1889, presided over what's seen as the golden age of Dahomeyan history, ushering in an era of economic prosperity and political strength. Okay, so here's a picture here. John Boyega did a good job. At the end of the movie, now King Gezo probably didn't say this, but one of the things that movies do, they don't just deal with history, but they also relate to today and inspire you to today. And one of the things that he said toward the end of the movie, he probably didn't say this in real life, is that African people have to unite and stop fighting against one another. I totally agree with that. He probably didn't say it in real life, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't say it in the movie, because that inspires you and causes you to think today. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. List to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. All right. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Also, if you like this type of information, you support the African History Network, we definitely need your support. One of the things we're going to do is buy a new laptop. $sign the AHN show through Cash App. $sign the AHN show through Cash App, also through PayPal. paypal.me/the AHN show. Okay, and we have the information at our website, TheAHNShow.com, TheAHNShow.com. Okay, also you can register for the online class. We had a great class this past Saturday. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa and the slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, next class is going to be, I think Saturday, September 24th. I'm going to update the website right now. So as soon as you register, we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You go back and watch it anytime. Back from break in 2 minutes. Okay, so yeah, back from break in 2 minutes. Let me update this here. Back from break in 1 minute.
I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We do with current events and history and much, much more. We're going to give you an update on what's going on. This is about self-preservation. We have to extinguish the fire of white supremacy. See, lessons have consequences. Catch it all right here on AM Superstation.
Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right. Visit our website, TheAHNShow.com, TheAHNShow.com. You can support us through PayPal or Cash App, $sign the AHN show through Cash App, then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Click on the links here. This is our official Cash App account, $sign the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it says Michael. It shows my picture there. These other ones are fake African History Network Cash App accounts that I'm still trying to get shut down. There's like 5 of them that I've identified that have been stealing money from us. That's not us, okay? So when you go to ours, it'll say Michael and show my picture there, and we have the link here, which will take you to it. Have our barcode or scan code there. And then register for the online classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. well, Thursdays, Tuesdays and Thursdays, but this new class, we've been doing it on Saturdays time being. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We go deep into this history. We do it thousands of years of history, what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We do this on Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next class is September 24th. Class number 2 is this past Saturday. As soon as you register, it's archived, and you can watch the class. So we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch them anytime. And we also have a bundle pack of the classes as well. The second class I teach is from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Okay, I want to go back to this. Then we'll go to our guest, Brother Nkosi from African Math. If we go back to this really good article here from SmithsonianMag.com dealing with the real women warriors of Dahomey. Now, the movie The Woman King opens in 1823 as a sequel with a successful raid by the Goji, who freed captives bound for enslavement from the clutches of the Oyo Empire, a powerful Yoruba state in what is now southwestern Nigeria, because they had to pay tribute to the Oyo Empire, okay? And they would pay tribute oftentimes in captives. Dahomey has long paid tribute to Oyo, but is beginning to assert itself under the leadership of King Gezo and General Naniska. A parallel plot line finds Naniska, who disapproves of the slave trade after experiencing its horrors, personally urging Gezo to end Dahomey's close relationship with Portuguese slave traders and shift to production of palm oils as the kingdom's main export. The real Gezo did, in fact, successfully free Dahomey from its tributary status in 1823 with the Oyo Empire, but the kingdom's involvement in the slave trade does not align as neatly with the historical record. As historian Robin Law notes, Dahomey emerged as a key player in the trafficking of West Africans between the 1680s and early 1700s, selling captives to European traders whose presence and demand fueled the industry, whose presence and demand for Africans fueled the industry, and in turn, the monumental scale of Dahomey's warfare. Though the majority of the individuals taken prisoner by Dahomey were enslaved abroad, a not insignificant number remained in the kingdom, where they served on royal farms, in the army, or at the palace. In truth, King Gezo only agreed to end Dahomey's participation in the slave trade in 1852 after years of pressure by the British government, which had abolished slavery for not wholly altruistic reasons in its own colonies in 1833, 1834. And what happened was, now it's important for people to understand, they didn't, yes, you have British abolitionists, but Britain abolishes the international transatlantic slave trade in 1807, just like the U.S. did as well, okay? And I teach about this in my online class. If you look here at this article here there are numerous articles that deal with this. This is one from political.com, and we just talked about this past weekend class. Congress votes to ban slave importation March 2nd, 1807. Okay. This goes with Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Congress abolished the international transatlantic slave trade, which means bringing Africans into the country to enslave them. Now, it was still legal to have slavery within the United States, because this is after the American Revolutionary War, so these are states, not colonies. It's still legal to have it. A lot of the northern states have abolished slavery by now. Some still have to do it, like New York, but Massachusetts and Connecticut and things like this, some have already abolished it. The U.S. is still going to bring Africans in. You're going to have slave traders who still do this. This becomes illegal. You're going to have U.S. naval ships out on the seas looking for slave ships, so that they could take that cargo take those Africans, arrest the crew. The British are also doing the same thing. This is actually referenced in the movie because Great Britain abolishes their participation in the international transatlantic slave trade in 1807. You're going to see different European nations enter into international treaties to abolish the international transatlantic slave trade. Now, many of them are going to violate it and still bring Africans into their respective countries and colonies. The U.S. is no exception. This is how you get the Clotilda in 1860, and then the Amistad, the U.S. Supreme Court case of the Amistad, the United States versus Amistad, 1841. We know those were Portuguese slave catch. Those were Portuguese slavers, but the ship ends up in U.S. waters and it gets captured. This and Joseph St. Q, those other Africans, they go to court and the case ends up going to the U.S. Supreme Court and they win their freedom in the U.S. Supreme Court. In the U.S. The case is you can read about it at archives.gov, which is the U.S. National Archives, archives.gov. They have some of the original court documents there. The United States Supreme Court ruled that it was illegal for those Africans to be captured, number one, because it violated international law. Number two, they ruled that it was illegal for those Africans to be brought into the country because the international transatlantic slave trade had been abolished in 1807, and that went into effect January 1st, 1808. And they won their freedom in the U.S. Supreme Court. They ended up being sent back to Africa. Now, it was abolitionists. The court didn't award them money to go back to Africa. It was abolitionists who had to raise money to send them back to Sierra Leone. Okay. But they won their freedom in court. Now the reason why the U.S. abolishes the international transatlantic slave trade in 1808 is based upon Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution, which helps to lay a legal foundation for reparations in this country, because all of the Africans who were brought into this country from January 1st, 1808 to about July of 1860, when the Clotilda comes into Alabama, all that was illegal based upon federal law. So now you have a legal argument. Just saying that we worked for free for 246 years is not a legal argument, because what law are you citing the slaves were supposed to be paid? Was it a law in a colony? Which colony? Was it a law in a state? Which state? Just because there's one state doesn't mean it applies to the other states. You have different individual state governments. Was it federal law? What federal law are you citing? But understanding law, and that the judicial branch of the federal government interprets law from the legislative branch of the federal government, then if we ever do get reparations, guess what? If it goes to court and it's not on sound legal foundation, guess what? It's going to be struck down like Roe versus Wade. And this is something that the cut the check people, a lot of them are not thinking about, maybe a few of them. That's why we have to understand history and law to make legal arguments for reparations. That's based upon Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. We'll pull that up on the other side of the break, because I deal with this in the class as well. Okay, I want to go to, we're coming up on a break here. We're going to continue this after this interview here I'm going to do with Brother Cozy. Thanks for holding Brother Cozy as well. We're going to be on right here. Brother Cozy is, I met at the Liberated Minds Black Homeschooling Education Expo a few years ago, and he gave me a ride back to the hotel. Had to go get my DVDs and things like that. And this brother has some fantastic information dealing with African math. Now, African math is an ancient mathematics system which thrived throughout the entire continent of Africa during the prehistoric era, but unfortunately fell out of common use due to upheavals caused by the Great Maafa Kiswahili term, which refers to our Holocaust, the transatlantic slave trade. This once lost ancient African indigenous knowledge system has been revived and is being reintroduced as a modern math program, thanks to 10 years of research and development by an independent researcher who has organized this African intellectual treasure into a practical curriculum. And when I met him at the Liberated Minds Black Homeschooling Education Expo in Atlanta, he had a vendor booth and he was educating people on African math. Kumi African Abacus Numeracy Game Book #1 is the first of a growing series of African math activity books available at Amazon.com with easy to follow along book. It's an easy to follow along book with tutorials which can be found on the African Math YouTube channel. When we come back from the break, we're going to speak with Brother Cozy. Listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by. We'll come back to this topic dealing with the woman king after I do this interview. Stand by, everybody. Stand by. Back for break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Okay, back from break in 4 minutes. 3 minutes, 3 minutes. Actually, 2 minutes. Stand by. When we come back, we're going to speak with Brother Cozy about African math. Then we'll go back and I'll deal some more with the woman king, separating fact from fiction, because I have a ton of information on this topic. I'm going to have to do a separate broadcast dealing with the woman king. Back from break in 1 minute. Back from break in 1 minute. Stand by, everybody. Back from break in 1 minute. All right, thanks, Gregory. Thanks for the support.
Here on the African History Network show, we do recurring events and history and much, much more. We're going to give you an update on what's going on. This is about self-preservation. We have to extinguish the fire of white supremacy so elections have consequences. Catch it all right here on 910 AM Super.
Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right, on the line we have Brother Cozy with African Math, AfricanMath.com. And right before the break, I was giving you a brief synopsis of African math. This is a brother who I met at the Liberated Minds Black Homeschooling and Education Expo some years ago, because first time I went was like 10 years ago. It was taking place in Atlanta, but now it's virtual. So we just had a conference in June. I think it was June, and I was one of the presenters there in June. But welcome to the African History Network show, Brother Cozy. How you doing today, brother?
Thank you, brother Mike. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, no problem, brother. Okay, so give us some more information. I gave a brief synopsis of African math, and once again, people can purchase the books at Amazon.com. Kumi African Abacus Numeracy game book, and we'll get that information up on the screen also. But give us some more information on African math.
Well, African math, it to, of course, prehistoric times. It is a combination of very advanced math systems that can be traced back to Southern Africa, East Africa, West Africa, Northern Africa, even the Olmec Empire here in Americas seem to have certain roots in African math, because when I did the research and started following the breadcrumbs, I noticed that Africans have a very diverse number of spoken languages. And then as I did the research, I realized that the same way we have a very diverse number of spoken languages, we also have a very diverse method of mathematical languages.
Okay.
So when I started following the breadcrumbs, even when I went to South Africa, it's just amazing how even the counting systems and Africa tie into those mathematical languages.
Okay. So is there now, do people have to learn an African language to do African math? If so, which African language would maybe be the primary one?
Oh man, that's a very good question. So no, you don't have to learn an African language. What you have to learn is the counting structure embedded within African languages. So when I follow the breadcrumbs back, and I don't want to get too much into the math because it can be but the math is very sophisticated. But if you look at the counting languages in Africa, ancient African ancestors, they embedded algorithms into the counting systems. So if you go to South Africa, there's counting systems, very advanced algorithms. Like instead of when you get to 8, there's an algorithm that says 10 take away 2 equals 8, and 10 take away 1 is how you would say 9. And that's very important because when you use the African abacus, which is a tremendous finding in and of itself, those algorithms give you instruction on how to do your mathematical process. And then in Nigeria, Nigerians have been utilizing a base 20 counting system since the beginning of time. So again, when you study mathematics, and it's like Wakanda math. It's so sophisticated and it's mind blowing that if you just study African culture, African language, it's embedded within the counting system.
Okay, it's embedded within the counting system. Okay, now explain. Now up on the screen, I'm on your website, and we're looking at Kumi Playbook #1, African Abacus Numeracy game ages, 2+. Is that 2 year? Is that 2 years old and up, or what's 2+ mean?
Yeah, it's like age 2 and up.
Okay, age 2 and up.
Now,
okay,
go
ahead.
Right now, the thing is, with African knowledge systems, it's more cultural than it is simply academic.
Okay.
The academics are very important, and we've done a great deal of due diligence making sure to check those boxes.
Okay.
But what we found is that there's a lot lost with the approach to education by not making it integrated generationally as far as in a culture. So if you study African culture and rites of passage ceremonies at every phase of life, every generation is integrated somehow into some facet of life. And there's a large deal of involvement by elders and by parents. And that's just African culture. Okay. So as we started to revive African math, it's important to know that you can learn as early as an infant, actually. But even as 2 years old, you can start absorbing the concepts. Right. But of course, there needs to be some type of other, village involvement, our parents and other people involved.
Okay. So explain to people how, ages 2 and up. Okay, so explain to people how they would, how their children would learning African math. How would they actually use African math? Why should their children learn African math?
Okay, so the most important thing, I mean, of course, there's the cultural component, but
Okay.
Outside the cultural component, African math is very pragmatic and it's applicable. The way you would use African math is you start with what we call counting toys. You start with simple games. You start with simple counters and objects that ultimately will lead the learner into numeracy concepts that they could then take into the African abacus. So,
Okay.
African abacus is an incredible numeracy tool that predates the abacus that we more recognize today, that comes from China and other parts of Asia. The African abacus is it's the Mancala board, or it's the Senate board in ancient Kemet.
Okay.
And people mistakenly, Westerners have mistakenly assumed that it's a board game, but it's actually an ancient manual computation device. So you want to play games with the learners and get them familiar with quantity recognition and symbols that represent those quantities.
Right.
And then that leads them, once they develop that conceptual understanding, that leads them into the African abacus.
Okay, so basically they taught math in ancient times in African societies. They basically taught math through games, like to children.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay, so now that's
100%.
So that's like academic games, like in elementary schools. They'll have academic games, which I'm not saying it's the same thing, but it's kind of like the concept. They have what's called academic games, which teaches children math skills, and they have tournaments, academic game tournaments, things like that. And it turns math into a game to teach them math skills and more complex math skills. So it's something along that line.
Correct. And like if you go online and you just look up traditional African games or African traditional games, that you'll find the foundation of double Dutch goes to Africa. There's a game called the Keto in South Africa where you throw a stone up in the air and you move stones and then you catch the stone that you threw up in the air.
What's the name of that game again?
Foundation of
what's the name of
the
it?
game that the Keto, Diketo.
Okay.
That's the foundation of the game. That you remember the ball? You remember jacks where you have the ball and
right.
That's from Africa. That's a game called the Keto, Diketo. That's commonly played in South Africa. And then that game again gives you incredible hand-eye coordination, but it also gives you the complements of whatever numeracy system you're building. So it depends on what quantity you play, but that's the root of that game. So our ancestors had a curriculum approach that was very organic and cultural, rooted in play, so that approach transition learning seamlessly into more advanced mathematical concepts. So if you go look at our video on our YouTube channel on African Abacus, you can get a little insight onto how things that were perceived solely as games are actually very advanced and sophisticated numeracy devices that you learn culturally. So the classroom concept of learning, which grew out of the West, grew from an environment of a classroom environment because Africans had already built the learning institutions that they came to be a part of.
Right.
So and using the math system that's dated back to ancient Africa. So it's a different concept. It's a different culture. Like I grew up with hip hop, and again, that was a culture that was rooted in play and having fun, at least originally back in the 70s and 80s. And then prior to that, You know, if you look at just the cultural contributions that came through rock and roll, it was, or came through jazz, or that came through Lindy Hop and tap dancing, and just a myriad of different cultural contributions that came out of our community. It was organic, and it was deeply rooted in fun and play.
Okay,
so that's what Aftermath is.
Quickly give people the website address, because we're running out of time here. Give people the website address, how they can learn more, and how they can order the books.
Okay, well, this is a very good question. First, just go to AfricanMath.com.
Okay.
AfricanMath.com. Go to the upper right-hand corner and click Login. Okay. And then it'll give you an option at the bottom middle to join. To join now. Okay. And if you just join our mailing list and subscription, that would be a good way for us to keep in contact with you, keep you abreast of what's going on. Okay. And we're also teaching a class right now, Liberated Minds. So just go to our website and we'll send you that information. All right.
AfricanMath.com.
When you join.
Yeah. And then also click on books, because you can order the books there at the top of the page. All right, Brother Cozy, we're going to have you back. Thanks for coming on tonight, man. Take care, brother. Okay. All right. Peace.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Peace. All right, everybody, we'll be back in a few minutes. Listen to the African History Network show. We're going to continue our discussion dealing with the movie The Woman King, and we're going to answer some of your questions. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. All right, stand by, everybody. All right, everybody, visit AfricanMath.com, AfricanMath.com. You can purchase those books for your children. It also has math games for them to play as well. AfricanMath.com. Back from break in 3 minutes. Back from break in 2 minutes. Back from break in 1 minute. Welcome back to the History Network show. All right. Right before the break, before the interview I just did, we were talking about the movie The Woman King. I was looking up some information here. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. So you can look at this at congress.gov, congress.gov, okay? This is what abolished the U.S. participation in the international transatlantic slave trade. Let me flip over to this also. Okay, this is at congress.gov, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1, restrictions on the slave trade, restrictions on the slave trade. A lot of people don't know that the U.S. Constitution lays the foundation for a legal argument for reparations. Reason why we don't understand this is because most of us don't understand history or law. This is problematic. The migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit shall not be prohibited by Congress prior to the year 1808. That's 1808, 1808. But a tax or duty may be imposed on such importation not exceeding $10 for each person. Okay, so for all the Africans that came into this country up until that time, 1808, a tax was paid on them also, not exceeding $10 for each person as well. So we should investigate, well, how much money did the government make off of these taxes that were paid on these Africans coming to this country? And then also look at interest, right? Because this is right here in the U.S. Constitution. Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution tells you that the U.S. Constitution, all the previous treaties and all of the subsequent treaties are the supreme law of the land. This sanction for the importation of slaves by the states for 20 years after the adoption of the Constitution, when considered with the section requiring escaped slaves to be returned to their masters, as Article 4, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. That's the Article 4, Section 2 laid the foundation for the Fugitive Slave Acts of 1793 and 1850. Return to their masters was held by Chief Justice Taney and Scott versus Sanford, 1857. Dred Scott versus Sandford, not S-A-N-F-O-R-D, not Fred Sanford, Sandford, to show conclusively that such persons and their descendants were not embraced with the term citizen and as used in the Constitution. Today, this ruling is interesting only as historical curiosity. Okay, so check this out here. Okay, that deals with the U.S. Constitution. Okay, now let's go to this. Now, I got another question here, a text message, another question. Somebody asked me, she said, do you think America, the same person who's asked me the previous questions that texted me, do you think America was better with that ideology of white male patriarchy? Ideology of patriarchy, thinking another day for another discussion. Okay, do you think America was better with that ideology of patriarchy? Okay, well, if you ask a lot of men, especially prior to 1920, when women got the right to vote, especially white women, if you ask a lot of men, they'll say yes. If you ask a lot of women, they'll probably say no. And women today, especially African-American women, are still fighting for equal rights, equal pay, things like this. So generally speaking, if you understand history, no, it wasn't better under white male patriarchy or patriarchy adopted by different ethnic groups. No. But especially if you ask women, the majority of them, now you get some white Christian nationalists, idiots, Stepford wife idiots. They may say it was better because they want to be barefoot and pregnant or something like that, you know. But generally speaking, no, it wasn't. But for white men, it was. Okay, let's go back to this article here from SmithsonianMag.com, and this deals with the real warriors, the real warrior women of Dahomey. Now, in response to concerns about how her movie would depict Dahomey's engagement with European slave traders, Gina Prince Bythewood, who's the African-American female director of the film, told The Hollywood Reporter, quote, we're going to tell the truth. We're not going to shy away from anything, but also we're telling a part of the story, which is about overcoming and fighting for what's right. Now, portraying the Goji through Nanisca's actions as critics of the slave trade makes for a nice story, says Larson in an interview. Do I think it's historically accurate? I'm skeptical. She adds, these women are symbols of strength and of power, but they're also complicit in a problematic system. They are still under the patriarchy of the king, and they are still players in the slave trade. Now, Maria Bello, an actress and producer who co-wrote the story, The Woman King script, is based upon first learned about the Goji during a 2015 trip to Benin. Recognizing the subject's cinematic appeal, she persuaded producer Kathy Schulman to find a studio willing to finance the project. Gina Prince Bythewood and Viola Davis joined the team soon after. Quote, it was a constant push and fight to convince people that we deserve a big budget. It had a $50 million budget. It was a constant push and fight to convince people that we deserve a big budget, that we deserved to tell a story like this. Gina Prince Bythewood tells the Los Angeles Times. Now, this was the real, African female warriors of Dahomey were the real life inspiration of the Dora Milaje in the film Black Panther. I've talked about that before here numerous times on this show, and I deal with this in my online classes. We do a whole section dealing with the film Black Panther as it relates to African history and culture in my courses, and I've done lectures dealing with the film Black Panther also. It's a powerful movie on multiple levels. Wakanda is a real word as well. Wakanda, we see it in the Omaha Ponca and Sioux Indian languages, and Osage. It means possesses secret powers, and it's a Kikongo word. It's in reference to family in Kikongo. Now, that the film was greenlit at all stems from the blockbuster success of 2018's Black Panther, which did $1.3 billion internationally, totally internationally, which testified to the demand for entertainment created by and featuring Black creatives. The movie's Dora Milaje regiment was inspired by the Ogoji, also known as the Ahosi. Okay, for so long, Hollywood has only ever framed Africa in stereotypical ways. Aji Ori Agbesi, I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, Agbese, an expert on African cinema at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, tells Miss Magazine. So the Woman King, centered on African women and African history, will generate a conversation. We have Black Panther to thank for that. More than a conversation, it has to generate actual research. That's why I'm sharing this article with you. There are other articles also. There's a ton of articles that have been written in the past couple of weeks, and some have resurfaced from a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, on this subject. So what we see on the screen has to encourage us to actually go study this real history, okay? Those watching on Facebook and YouTube, keep watching for a few more minutes. We're going to keep this discussion going because I control my own platforms. We're out of time here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. Visit our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com as well. You can support us through Cash App or PayPal, and you can register for the online classes I teach also. Right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win Wakanda forever, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace. All right, stand by. Okay. And visit our website, historynetwork.com, right here. Visit our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, so you can register for my online history classes where we go deep in this information. You can also support us through Cash App and PayPal as well. All right, so next class is Saturday, September 24th. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. All right. Let's go back to this piece here from SmithsonianMag.com. So who were the Goji? The first recorded mention of the Goji dates back to 1729, dates back to 1729. But the unit was possibly formed earlier, even earlier, toward the beginning of Dahomey's existence, when King Huwekbaja reigned circa 1645 to 1685, created a corps of women elephant hunters. Now, the real history, because I looked at different sources for this, the real origins of them is not really known. There's some theories. One theory is that they developed as a group of, developed from a group of elephant hunters. There's no real definitive explanation on how they evolved. One theory is that they evolved as palace guards. Another theory is that they evolved as elephant hunters. Now, alternatively, Hongbi, who briefly ruled as regent following the death of her brother in the early 18th century, may have introduced the women warriors as part of her palace guard. Either way, the Goji reached their peak in the 19th century under King Gezo, who formally incorporated them into Dahomey's army. Thanks to the kingdom's ongoing wars, Dahomey's male population had dropped significantly, creating an opportunity for women to replace men on the battlefield, but oftentimes they would fight alongside men on the battlefield as well. Now, more perhaps than any other African state, Dahomey was depicted to warfare. More perhaps than any other African state, Dahomey was dedicated to warfare and slave raiding, wrote Stanley B. Alpern in the book Amazons of Black Sparta, The Women Warriors of Dahomey, the first full-length English language study of the Goji. Quote, it may also have been the most totalitarian, with the king controlling and regimenting practically every aspect of social life. Here's a picture from the movie as well. A scene from the movie. That's from the beginning of the movie, actually. Dahomey's standing army was an anomaly in and of itself, as most of the African kingdoms disbanded their forces when not actively at war. The fact that the Goji and their male counterparts wore uniforms also set them apart, establishing the Dahomeyan military as an organized, highly visible fighting force. All right, I'm going to skip ahead. There's some different couple of sections I want to look at here. A couple of articles, other articles we're going to look at as well. Okay, intensive training. Okay, to become an Goji, recruits underwent intensive training, and we saw this depicted in the film. They had to develop a tolerance for pain. They had to run over acacia thorns and through acacia thorns, all different types of things like this, and show no pain, including exercises designed to harden them to bloodshed. In 1889, French naval officer John Bayol, Bayol, witnessed Naniska, who likely inspired the name of Viola Davis' character in The Woman King. Naniska, in reality, she was a Goji, but she was a teenager, quote, who had not yet killed anyone when French naval officer John Bayol witnessed her, okay? And who had not killed anyone. He witnessed her easily pass a test of wheels. Walking up to a condemned prisoner, she reportedly swung her sword 3 times with both hands, then calmly cut the last flesh that attached the head to the trunk. She then squeezed the blood off her weapon and swallowed it. So you'll see in some African cultures, but some European cultures as well, on the battlefield, in battle, you will see warriors drink some of the blood of those who they killed, because it was thought that you would take on some of their strength, some of their power. Okay, so you would see this is not exclusive to the Goji. You would see this in different periods of times, different warriors. Another common form of training involved mock assaults that found recruits scrambling across towering walls of acacia thorns. We see this depicted in the film. In the words of a British traveler who examined the barriers, quote, I could not persuade myself that any human being without boots or shoes would under any circumstances attempt to pass over so dangerous a collection of the most efficiently armed plants I had ever seen. Okay, so we see this depicted in the film as well. Now, the Goji's division consisted of 5 branches: blunderbuss or artillery women, elephant hunters, musketeers, razor women, and archers. Surprising the enemy was of the utmost importance. Warriors snuck up on villages at or before dawn, taking captives and decapitating those who resisted. Though European accounts of the Goji vary widely, what is indisputable is their constantly outstanding performance in combat, wrote Alpern in Amazons of Black Sparta. With the rest of the Dahomeyan army, these women warriors were, quote, the scourge and terror of the whole surrounding country, always at war and generally victorious, as an American missionary later recounted. Okay, now what happened to the Goji? Dahomey's military dominance started to wane in the second half of the 19th century, so the second half of the 1800s, when its army repeatedly failed to capture Abeokuta, a well-fortified Egba capital in what is now southwest Nigeria. An 1851 battle with the Egba, who settled in the region following the decline of the Oyo Empire, and you see them fighting the Oyo Empire in the movie, and this is historically because they had to pay tributes to the Oyo Empire, which was a Yoruba Empire, which is in modern-day Nigeria today. Following the decline of the Oyo Empire resulted in the deaths of up to 2,000 Goji. In 1864, King Glele, the son of Gezo, who succeeds Gezo, a few years earlier, sought to avenge his father's defeat at Abeokuta, but was forced to retreat after just an hour and a half of fighting. Dahomeyan forces continued to target Egba villages until the early 1890s, when war with the French threatened the kingdom's very existence. So these are the Franco-Dahomeyan wars in the 1890s. Now, Dahomey's encounters with European colonizers had historically revolved mainly around the slave trade and religious missions. As the scramble for Africa ramped up, however, and we were going to see this escalate after the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, where those 14 European nations carve up Africa into colonies. As the scramble for Africa ramped up, however, tensions between Dahomey and France escalated. In 1863, the French declared the neighboring kingdom of Porto Novo a colonial protectorate, angering King Glele of Dahomey, who considered Porto Novo a vassal of Dahomey. Glele also clashed with the French over the port of Cotonou. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Cotonou. Here is a drawing of Bahazin in 1885. Now this is a sketch of sketch drawing, British illustration of French and Dahomeyan forces fighting in 1893. Okay, this is during the Franco-Dahomeyan Wars. Now, as Larson articulates, the existence and dominance of Dahomey's women warriors upset the French's understanding of gender roles, and what women were supposed to do in a civilized society. The women's flaunting of ferocity, physical power, and fearlessness was manipulated or corrupted as Europeans started to interpret it in their own context of what they felt society should be. So you have Europeans superimposing on these African cultures what they think society should be, what they think civilization should be like. And in various African cultures where women had more freedom, then these Europeans look down upon that, because once again, they're coming with white male patriarchy. And you're also going to see this conflict dealing with some groups of Muslims, not all Muslims, but some groups of Muslims, especially Arabicized Muslims. So this is going to play a role when El Mansur of Morocco invades Songhai in 1591. Okay, Songhai Empire in 1591, and you have disputes over the role of African women in Islam. And generally speaking, there are exceptions. Generally speaking, Islam in East Africa tended to look different, generally speaking, than Islam in West Africa, because Islam in East Africa, like you go back to the times of the 1300s, 1400s, 1200s, 1100s, things like this. Islam in East Africa was largely spread by Arabs. So African culture, generally speaking, was not allowed to be freely incorporated into that Arabicized Islam. But generally speaking, Islam in West Africa was more so spread by Islamicized Africans. So West African culture is allowed to be infused more so into Islam in West Africa than East Africa. There are exceptions to that, but just generally speaking. And this caused conflicts with different groups of Muslims because of the freedom in many of these West African societies that women had. Okay, who has some information? Well, Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay, in his lectures, the History of the Moors in Spain, which is on our YouTube channel, and that's on YouTube. He deals with that in there. I think Maleficenti Asante talks about that in Classical Africa, the book Classical Africa, but there are different sources on it. But Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay does talk about that, because he talks about El Mansur invading Songhai in 1591. Okay, now for the French, the Goji were simply, quote, more fuel for the civilizing mission, end quote, who sought to impose European ideas on African countries. For the French, the Goji were simply more fuel for their civilizing mission, which sought to impose European ideas on African countries. And along with these European ideas come gender roles as well, based upon a European cultural paradigm infused, forced onto African people, as well as white Christianity also. Usually white Christianity as well. Now, the First Franco-Dahomean War began on February 21st, 1890, just 2 months after the accession of King Gleli's son, Kondo, who took the name Bahanzan upon claiming the throne. On March 4th, 1890, now what's interesting is this is taking place right in West Africa in Dahomey, 1890. And if we relate this to history like in this country, 1895, that's when Frederick Douglass dies. Okay, if we just look at this, we just look at this timeline, what's going on in West Africa, what's going on in the U.S. Because this is after the Civil War, after Reconstruction ends, you have Jim Crow laws being passed. This is 5 years after the Mississippi State Convention of 1890 that that rewrites the Mississippi State Constitution to impose poll taxes and literacy tests, right? Do you all know who Zara Cully is? Okay, Zara Cully played Mother Jefferson on the Jeffersons. Actress Zara Cully, Mother Jefferson. She died in 1978. Zara Cully was born in 1892. Zara Cully was born 3 years before Frederick Douglass died. Zara Cully was born 2 years after the first Franco-Dahomey War started in 1890. When you watch the Jeffersons, the episodes with Mother Jefferson, you're watching somebody who was living history. She was born before Harriet Tubman died in 1913. She was born in 1892 before Booker T. Washington died in 1915. She was born, I think, 27 years after slavery ended and the Civil War ended. Zara Cully, veteran actress, I think very underrated, best known for her role as Mother Jefferson on the Jeffersons. Born 2 years after the Franco-Dahomean War of 1890 began. All right, so that's just a little side note there. Okay, so on March 4th, 1890, the Dahomey army attacked the French at Cotonou, only to fall to the Europeans' vastly superior firepower. So this is the thing. Europeans are coming with superior weapons. Unfortunately, what the African Moors taught the Europeans came back to kick us in the behind, because the Moors are going to introduce something called a fire stick. A fire stick. Okay? And a fire stick, now I don't know what year, but you know, they go in 711 AD. So at some point they introduced the fire stick. And Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay talks about this. And the fire stick fires, it's a long stick that fires one round. Okay. The Europeans take this and they manufacture the first like rifle in the mid 14th century, somewhere around 1346 or so. But then they're going to take firearms to another level. And these Europeans are coming in with superior weapons, and they're coming in with the cannon. Okay, so between the rifle and the pistol and the cannon, then also the Bible, okay, and whiskey, because we see, you're going to see that they trade whiskey as well. And we see this depicted in the film, the Woman King as well. These are going to screw Africa up. Isn't it interesting that they traded whiskey, and you're going to have some Africans who get drunk, things like this. And in the African-American inner city, there's a liquor store on every other corner. Isn't it interesting that Europeans bring in whiskey, bring in alcohol to Africans to trade for African captives, or they may trade for other things. And then the African-American inner city, we have a liquor store on almost every corner. And they're designed to keep us drunk, because it's hard to fight back when you're drunk. Also, a lot of our communities have a proliferation of marijuana dispensaries. Now, I understand medicinal marijuana. Recreational marijuana, and the fact that for probably 30 years, maybe a little more than 30 years, especially marijuana usage has been infused into negative corporate controlled hip hop, even before it became legal. Rolling down the street, smoking Indo, sipping on gin and juice. How many crimes are you committing? Open contents, smoking marijuana, driving, even if you're the passenger, that's illegal in the car. Does the person have a legal driver's license? Do they have insurance? Are their tags valid? These are all things designed to suppress our ability to fight back, to suppress our ability to analyze what's going on, keep us high, keep us drunk, and keep us obese, because there's a fast food restaurant on every other corner as well. So just as they used whiskey and alcohol with Native Americans, just as Europeans use whiskey and alcohol with Africans on the continent of Africa, isn't ironic? Well, it's not ironic that we have a liquor store on almost every corner in the African American community. I would argue it's for the same purpose. I would argue it's for the same purpose. That's why I don't drink. I haven't had a drink probably 16, 17 years. Never used marijuana. I'm 51. I never used any type of illicit drug, never used marijuana, never had the desire to use marijuana. Because usually, you know, from seeing other people using marijuana and getting drunk, usually good things don't happen when you're high and drunk. I'm just saying. Usually good things don't happen when you're high and drunk. You usually don't make the best life choices when you're high and drunk. Naniska, the teenager, back to the article from SmithsonianMag.com. Naniska, the teenager who left such an impression on the French officer Bayol, B-A-Y-O-L, the previous year, decapitated the enemy's chief gunner, but died on the battlefield. So Naniska dies on the battlefield. Okay, it's like March 4th, like 1890. Upon seeing Naniska's body, Bayol wrote that a cleaver, quote cleaver, its curved blade engraved with fetish symbols, was attached to her left wrist by a small cord, and her right hand was clenched around the barrel of her carbine covered with cowries, okay, a rifle. After end quote, after facing a similar defeat at the Battle of Atchupa, Atchoupa, on April 20th, 1890, Dahomey agreed to a peace treaty assenting to French control over Porto Novo and Cotonou. The lull in warfare lasted less than 2 years. The lull in warfare lasted less than 2 years, an intermediary period that Bahazin spent equipping his army with weapons equal to or at least better matched with the French's. According to Alpern, upon receiving news of the French's declaration of war, the Dahomeyan king said, quote, "The first time I was ignorant of how to make war, but now I know if you want war, I am ready. I wouldn't stop even if it lasted 100 years and killed 20,000 of my men." And once again, they're trying to arm themselves. See, when you study this history, these Europeans gave them an ultimatum, oftentimes gave them an ultimatum. Either you provide us with captives. So there were already internal conflicts with different African ethnic groups. Either you provide us with captives. So when they would raid and they have these fights, the prisoners of war, they would sell. Now, keep in mind, slavery existed for going back thousands of years. Slavery existed in various forms. And when you would have wars, those prisoners of war, regardless of the country, those prisoners of war were often sold off as slaves. Africa, this is something that Professor Kabahaya Kamene talks about a lot. And when we bring him on the show, we'll probably talk about this as well. Professor James Small has dealt with this also. Before the transatlantic slave trade begins in the mid-14th century, 1441, with the Portuguese involvement, Africa already had a cultural servitude system. In the documentary 500 Years Later with Dr. Malefikete Asante and Dr. Maulana Karenga, they talk about this as well. In the cultural servitude system, you could be put into that system if you were a prisoner of war, or if you owed a debt. Okay, their cultural servitude system. Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene. He's in the Hidden Colors documentaries. We're in a couple documentaries together. We're in Elementary Genocide Part 3 from director Raheem Shabazz, and we're in the Black Friday documentaries from director Rick Mathis. I'm trying to think, is there another documentary in together? I was supposed to be in Hot P. He's not in Hot P. Professor James Small is in Hot P. I was supposed to be in Hot P from Taki Grant, but we could never connect to do my interview. Because I'm in 7 documentaries. I just don't talk about it a lot. But with the cultural servitude system, it was not for perpetuity. This already exists in Africa. Okay. Europeans had a feudalistic system with their lords and their serfs, feudalism, which goes back to, I think, 10th century AD, something like that, Common Era. And Europeans are going to superimpose their feudalistic system over the existing cultural servitude system to create what we know as chattel slavery. Because chattel slavery, where you're enslaved for perpetuity and your children are born into slavery, but also with chattel slavery, it wasn't just for perpetuity. It was also you were enslaved based upon race. And we're going to see that evolve as well as we go into the 1700s, 1800s, and we definitely see that here in the U.S., the 13 colonies, as they move from white indentured servitude for various reasons. One of them, you have a lot of white indentured servants revolting, and they don't want to come to the U.S., to come to the colonies, and different reasons like that. We're going to see a greater dependence on enslaved Africans, and they're going to be codified laws surrounding enslaving Africans for perpetuity as well, moving from indentured servitude that we see in the 1619, 1620s, things like that, to Massachusetts being the first colony with codified slave laws in 1641, and Connecticut 1650, about 1660 with Virginia, because these codified slave laws are coming to these different British colonies, British, not the United States at this point. These are British colonies, Great Britain, okay? And then we see under 1775, when the American Revolutionary War starts, that's under King George III, okay, who is an ancestor to Queen Elizabeth II. Okay. Now, his wife was also Queen Charlotte Sophia, who we talked about in one of my broadcasts dealing with Queen Elizabeth passing away, and we talk about Meghan Markle. And people were asking, was Meghan Markle going to be the first mixed race queen or something like that? She's the Duchess of Sussex. She gave up her title. But Queen Charlotte Sophia was actually a queen, okay? And she was of African Moorish ancestry on at least from one side of her family, possibly her father's side of the family as well. Wife to King George III. And there's a good article from the Washington Post that deals with this. This was written by Deneen L. Brown, and it deals with Queen Charlotte Sophia. Because the African Moors are going to go all throughout Europe, and they intermix to varying degrees into the European bloodline. So you're going to get a lot of these biracial or mixed race people. This article right here. Britain's Black Queen will Meghan Markle really be the first mixed race royal? So Deneen L. Brown writes some really good articles for the Washington Post. This came out November 27, 2018. So this was a few months before her wedding, okay? Because her wedding was May 19th, 2018. So that was actually on Queen Charlotte Sophia's birthday, the wedding, and it was on Malcolm X's birthday. I don't think it had anything to do with Malcolm X's birthday. I think that's probably a coincidence. I'm not sure if they had it on that date because it was Queen Charlotte Sophia's birthday. But I doubt very seriously if they had the wedding on that date because it was Malcolm X's birthday. Historian Mario de Valdez y Cocom, C-O-C-O-M, argues that Queen Charlotte Sophia was directly descended from a black branch of the Portuguese royal family, directly descended from the black branch of the Portuguese royal family. There's a book written by I met the sister. We had her here on the show. What's her name? Not Dr. Dana Ramey Berry, not her, but what's my sister's name? She's an African American female historian. She has a in the book that Nate Parker put out about the his Nat Turner movie. Hold on, I'll give you her name. We want to give this sister her due respect because there's a lot of work putting together that book. Let me see if I could find her name. This is another article dealing with Queen Charlotte Sophia. This is one from AtlantaBlackStar.com. Let me see. Is she mentioned in this article? Because I have to find my book. I have to find my book from Nate Parker's movie, The Birth of a Nation. What the hell is that book? Hold on. I'm going to find it. Nate Parker, Birth of a Nation. Just a second. I gotta find it. I'm not sure where it is. Nope. That's Gates. But anyway, let's continue here. Historian Mario de Valdez argues that Queen Charlotte was directly descended from a black branch of the Portuguese royal family, Alfonso III and his concubine Oruana, Ouruana, who was a black Moor, who was an African Moor. In the 13th century, Alfonso III of Portugal conquered a little town named Faro, F-A-R-O, from the Moors, said Valdez, who's a researcher on the 1996 Frontline PBS documentary Secret Daughter. He demanded the governor's daughter as a paramour. He had 3 children with her. According to Valdez, one of their sons, Martin Alfonso, married into the noble de Souza family, who also had black ancestry. Okay, because especially in Portugal, Spain and Portugal, there's a reason why they have a darker complexion, because that's right above the Morocco, where the Moors were going into, and Spain and Portugal get the brunt of the intermixing. It's going to happen in Sicily, in France, in Germany, in Austria, in England, but the going further east is going to happen to a lesser extent, even though it will happen. But Spain and Portugal get the brunt of it, and Sicily as well. That's why they tend to have a darker complexion, because of more intermixing from the Moors into the bloodline. Queen Charlotte had African blood from both families. Okay, so read the rest of this here, as we're running out of time. Britain's Black Queen, will Meghan Markle really be the first mixed race royal? No, she will not. Far from it. There was a lot of mixed race royals. Far from it. Okay, now, let me go back to this here. Let's go back to this article quickly. Okay, let's continue. So Bahanzin proved true to his word over the course of 7 weeks in fall 1892. Dahomey's army fought valiantly to repel the French. The Goji participated in 23 separate engagements during that short time span, earning the enemy's respect for their valor, and dedication to the cause. As one Marine noted, neither the cannons nor the canister shot nor the salvo fire stops them. It's really strange to see women so well led, so well disciplined, end quote. Those sources disagree on the number of women warriors who fought in the Second Franco-Dahomean War. Alpern cites between 1,200 to 2,500 as a likely range. Now, this is a real general, okay? Sedong Hong Bay, a leader of the Goji, holding the severed head of an enemy, okay? And you see her with her rifle also. At the village on October 6th, the Goji suffered arguably their worst losses yet, with just 17 soldiers returning from an initial force of 434. Bahanzin's brother, Sagbaju Gleli, who lived until the 1970s, told a local historian that the battle brought a moment of clarity for Dahomey's courtiers, who now realized the inevitability of their kingdom's destruction. The Dahomean army made a final stand at Cana, C-A-N-A, or Cana, in early November. Okay, that'd be 1890. What was that year? Should be 1892. Dahomean War, probably 1892. They made a final stand. Yeah, November 1892. The last day of the fighting, reported a French Marine colonel, was, quote, one of the most murderous of the entire war, beginning with the dramatic entrance of, quote, the last Amazons, as well as the elephant hunters, whose special assignment was to direct their fire at the officers. The French officially seized the Dahomey capital of Abomey on November 17th, 1892. Between 2,000 and 4,000 Dahomean warriors, including both men and women, died during the 7-week war. Of the roughly 1,200 Goji in fighting shape at the beginning of the war, just 50 or 60 remained ready for battle by its end. Comparatively, the French side lost 52 Europeans and 33 Africans on the battlefield. Okay. All right. So read the rest of this article here. This deals with separating a lot of fact from fiction. The real warriors behind the Woman King. September 15, 2022. This is from SmithsonianMag.com, Smithsonian Institute. Okay, now, I'm trying to find, where's my book on Nate Parker's movie, The Birth of a Nation. Because what's that sister's name? Not Dana Rainey Berry. They wrote the chapter together in his book. I need to buy some more. I need to buy some more bookcases. Where is that book? Hold on. Book of the Nation. That book. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere around here. Because I thought I recently had it. I don't know. I have to find it. A lot of people don't know that book exists. But what it was a book that went more in depth. Nate Parker put it out, and it went more in depth into his movie, The Birth of a Nation, that deals with the Nat Turner Rebellion. And there's a historical chapter in there by Dr. Dana Rainey Berry and this other sister. They're both two African-American female historians. Let me see here. And I interviewed both of them on my show at different times. The Birth of a Nation. And I want to see if I can find Birth of a Nation. Nate Parker. Okay, Birth of a Nation. Nate Parker essay. Erica Dunbar Armstrong. That's the sister's name. Erica Dunbar Armstrong. They those two sisters have a chapter in this book here. That's who I was looking, because I could see her face so clearly, but I couldn't remember her name. This is the book that Nate Parker put out dealing with his film, The Birth of a Nation, which is about the Nat Turner Rebellion. It's called The Birth of a Nation, Nat Turner and the Making of a Movement, edited by Nate Parker, now a major motion picture. Okay. And it has behind the scenes information, behind the scenes interviews with the cast, things like that. But it has a chapter dealing with the real history of Nat Turner and what happened after the Nat Turner Rebellion and his the trial of Nat Turner, things like this. And it's this chapter here, an essay by noted historians Erica Dunbar Armstrong and Dana Rainey Berry on Nat Turner's rebellion and other slave uprisings. They have a fantastic historical chapter in that book, separating fact from fiction. So her name is Erica Dunbar Armstrong. Erica Dunbar Armstrong also wrote a book about Queen Charlotte Sophia. Queen Charlotte, and her book on Queen Charlotte actually, if I remember correctly, Roland Martin interviewed her on Roland Martin Unfiltered about the book. Let me see something here. Where is that? Rutgers. She also wrote one. I think she wrote one on Queen Charlotte Sophia. She wrote one on Ona Judge called Never Caught. And Ona Judge was one of George Washington's runaway slaves, never caught. I think she wrote one on Queen Charlotte Sophia, because there's a book that an African American female historian wrote. But she wrote, Erica Armstrong Dunbar wrote this book here. This is a deep book. I've read excerpts of it, but I've studied about Ona Judge. And in Philadelphia, in the square in Philadelphia, where they used to auction off slaves, there's a historical section there that deals with Ona Judge. Okay, I've seen it in Philadelphia. I filmed some of that stuff. I have to find those recordings that I made. But I was on location in Philadelphia and filmed a lot of that. Never caught, the Washington's relentless pursuit for their runaway slave, Ona Judge. She was called Oni for short. And this is written by Erica Armstrong Dunbar, came out in 2017. She's a brilliant African-American female historian. And I think she teaches at, I guess she's still at Rutgers University. Here's a picture of her right here. Okay. All right. I need to get her back on the show too. See what she's been up to. I reached out to historian Talithia LaFloria, who's a friend of mine. We've had her on the show before. Talitha wrote this book here, Chained in Silence, Black Women and Convict Labor in the New South. Talitha L. LaFloria. So Dr. Talitha L. LaFloria, excuse me. So I talked to her, I sent her a text message yesterday because I asked her, has she seen the Woman King? She hasn't seen it yet. We're going to try to get her on the show also. She's an African-American female historian as well. Okay, now this article here and this other stuff we're going to get to later. I want to look quickly here at some information from Britannica.com. They have some really good historical information on Dahomey. Okay. Let's look at this here from Britannica.com. Okay, she also wrote a book called She Came to Slay about Harriet Tubman as well. I don't know who that was that wrote the book on Queen Charlotte. It was somebody that wrote the book on Queen Charlotte. I have to figure that one out. But anyway, if we look here at this piece here on Dahomey from Britannica.com, and they have some like really good information. I just got a new subscription to Britannica.com because we use some of this information in my classes. And for a lot of this information, you have to have a monthly subscription or yearly subscription to be able to access it. So I'm using my subscription right about now. Dahomey, historical kingdom, Africa. Date 1625 to 1894. Dahomey existed. Zoom in on this here. Zoom in on it. The Dahomey kingdom in Western Africa that flourished in the 18th and 19th centuries in the region that is now Benin. According to tradition, at the beginning of the 17th century, 3 brothers vied for the kingdom of Allada, A-L-L-A-D-A, which, like neighboring Ouida, okay, which is now Ouida, Ouida. That's a port. That's a port that was for trade, and you see this fight over access to that port between the Oyo Empire and Dahomey in the movie. Okay, and that's a port where they're trading with Europeans. Like neighboring Ouida, had grown rich on the slave trade. When one of the brothers won control of Alata, the other two fled. One went southeast and founded Porto Novo on the coast east of Ouida. The other went north to found the kingdom of Abomey, Abomey, core. This was a core portion of the future Dahomey. They all paid tribute to the powerful Yoruba kingdom of Oyo to the east. We see this depicted in the film, okay? And Dahomey paying tribute to the Oyo Empire, and they're going to have conflicts. They're going to fight. Okay, let me skip over some of the thriving on the okay, where European forts had already been established. The enlarged state was called Dahomey. Abomey, Alata, and Ouida were its provinces. Thriving on the sale of slaves to Europeans, the kingdom of Dahomey prospered and acquired new provinces under kings Tegbesu, Pingla, and Aganglo. After King Abandozan, 1797 to 1818, was overthrown by the great Gezo, you'll see different spellings for his name. Gezo, you'll see Gezo or Gezu. But there was a coup that took place, and Gezo is going to be installed in 1818. Dahomey reached the high point of his power and fame. The kingdom was a form of absolute monarchy unique in Africa. The king, surrounded by a magnificent retinue, was the unchallenged pinnacle of a rigidly stratified society of royalty, commoners, and slaves. He governed through a centralized bureaucracy staffed by commoners who could not threaten his authority, Each male, M-A-L-E, each male official in the field had a female counterpart at court who monitored his activities and advised the king. Conquered territories were assimilated through intermarriage, uniform laws, and a common tradition of enmity to the Yoruba. Okay. You're going to see African spirituality in the film, and you're going to see African Yoruba deities referenced, like Ogun, which is in Ifa. Dahomey was organized for war, not only to expand its boundaries, but also to take captives as slaves. Slaves were either sold to Europeans in exchange for weapons, or kept to work on rural plantations. Now, this is what I was talking about, because these different African ethnic groups are trying to get weapons, not swords. They're trying to get firearms to defend themselves from other African ethnic groups, but also other Europeans as well, because a lot of times they're dealing with more than one group of European colonizers, more than one nation. So they're trying to get these weapons to defend themselves, and then also acquire weapons in many cases so they can fight against the slave trade as well. That's why Sylvian Diop's book, which I showed you in the beginning of this broadcast, Fighting the Slave Trade, West African Strategies, is so important because it goes deep into that history. Okay, slaves were either sold to the Europeans in exchange for weapons, or kept to work the royal plantations that supplied food for the army and court. From approximately 1680, Common Era, AD, A regular census of population was taken as a basis for military conscription, meaning you serving in the military. Okay. A certain number, certain percentage have to serve in the military. Female soldiers called amazons by the Europeans served as royal bodyguards when not in combat. King Gezu or Gezo heightened the splendor of the court, encouraged the arts, and refined the bureaucracy. His armies freed Dahomey from the humiliation of paying tribute to the Oyo Empire. After about 1840, however, the kingdom's fortunes changed as Britain succeeded in putting an end to the overseas slave trade. So 1807 and 1834, Great Britain abolishes slavery in its colonies. They're going to pay reparations to 46,000 British slave owners, but not reparations to the 800,000 Africans they enslaved. So they want credit for abolishing the slave trade after like 272 years that they were involved in it. They get involved in 1562. You don't get credit for that. Gezu accomplished a smooth transition to palm oil exports. Slaves, instead of being sold, were kept to work palm plantations. Palm oil was far less lucrative than slaves, however, and an economic decline followed under Gezu's successor, Gleli, his son, when the French won control of Porto Novo and Cotonou and attracted coastal trade there. Commerce at Ouida collapsed after the ascension of Bahanzin, who served 1889 to 1894, because they're destroyed right around 1894, Dahomey. Hostilities were precipitated. In 1892, a French expedition under Colonel Alfred Dodds, Dodds, defeated the Dahomeans and established a protectorate. Bahanzin was deported to the West Indies. His former kingdom was absorbed into the French colony of Dahomey, with its capital at Porto Novo. Then it goes in and talks about the Oyo Empire in what's present-day Nigeria. Now, Oyo Empire, which was a Yoruba state north of Lagos, in present-day southwestern Nigeria, that dominated during 1650 to 1750. Most of the states between the Volta River in the west and Niger River in the east. It was the most important and authoritative of all the early Yoruba principalities. According to traditions, Oyo derived from a great Yoruba ancestor and hero, Oduduwa, who likely migrated to Ile-Ife and whose son became the first Alafin, or ruler, of Oyo. My Yoruba is much better than like the Fo or Dahomey, things like this. I know Yoruba words much better. Linguistic evidence suggests that two waves of immigrants came to Yoruba land between 700 AD and 1000 AD. The second settling at Oyo in the open country north of the Guinea forest. This second state became preeminent among all Yoruba states because of its favorable trading posts, its natural resources, and the industry of its inhabitants. Now, early in the 16th century, Oyo was a minor state and powerless before its northern neighbors, Borgu and I'm not sure, Nupe, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Nupe. by whom it was conquered in 1550. You're going to see these different kingdoms fighting and conquering one another. Okay, I don't know where this concept, Africa was not a utopia. Just as Europeans fought and killed one another for hundreds of years, and over 1,000 years, we did the same thing. Maybe not as extensive, but we did the same thing. You see the same thing in Africa. You see these all Pan-Africanism did not start in Africa. Pan-Africanism starts in the United States and the Caribbean in about like the 18th, 19th centuries. Okay. Pan-Africanism did not start in Africa with a concept that we should see ourselves as one global African people. And, you know, there's a commonality in our, we may speak different languages, but there's, you know, commonality in cultures and different things like this, but we should be a united African people, regardless of who our colonizers were, different things like this, regardless of what language you speak. Pan-Africanism did not start on the continent of Africa. So African people did not see themselves as one people. You had different ethnic groups: Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo. You have the Fo, Dahomey. You have, you know, Dogon, Mali, Burkina Faso. You have the Kikuyu or Jakuyu in Kenya, in East Africa. We didn't see ourselves all as one united people or anything like that. And it's the same thing. Europeans fought and killed each other. The English, the Anglos, the Saxons, the Lombards, the Jutes, the Franks, the Vandals, the Visigoths. They fought and killed each other for hundreds of years. The power of Oyo was already growing by the end of the century. However, thanks to the Alafin Orompoto, who used the wealth derived from trade to establish a cavalry force and to maintain a trained army. Oyo subjugated the kingdom of Dahomey in the West in two phases, 1724 to 1730 and 1738 to 1748, and traded with European merchants on the coast through the port of, which now is Porto Novo. As Oyo's wealth increased, so did its leaders' political options. Some wished to concentrate on amassing wealth, while others advocated the use of wealth for territorial expansion. The difference was not resolved until the Alafin Abiodun, who reigned from 1770 to 1789, conquered his opponents in a bitter civil war and pursued a policy of economic development based primarily on the coastal trade with European merchants. Because we were trading with Europeans. Now, personally, I think it was a mistake. I think we should have turned them around when that first ship came in and say, don't ever come back. Otherwise, you're going to meet your ancestors. Abiodun's neglect of everything but the economy weakened the army and thus the means by which the central government maintained control. His successor, Alafin Awole, inherited local revolts and administration, tenuously maintained by a complex system of public service and a decline in the power of tributary chiefs. The decline was exacerbated by quarrels between the Alafin and his advisors. We didn't all get along harmoniously. It continued throughout the 18th century and into the 19th century, when Oyo began to lose control. The oil empire began to lose control of its trade routes to the coast. The oil empire was invaded by the newly risen foe of Dahomey, and soon after the year 1800, it was captured by militant Fulani Muslims from Hausa land in the northeast. So that's like in present-day Nigeria as well. Okay, so check out this information. That's some good, really concise information at Britannica.com, which gives you like some good background information on all this. Just like Europeans fought and killed each other, unfortunately, African people did the same thing. Now, I don't like to see Africans fighting and killing each other, whether it's the oil empire and Dahomey, whether it's Bloods and Crips, whether it's the Jabari tribe and the Panther clan and Black Panther. I don't like to see Africans killing each other. But just like all Asians fought and killed, and you had wars in China and different things like that. You had wars all throughout Europe. Same thing in Africa. One last article, then I really got to get the hell out of here. You know, I'm about this information. I do like so much research. This is just a fraction of it's just a fraction of the information that I have on Dahomey. And but this is a really good article here. The complicated history behind the Woman King. We posted this on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network also. Okay. If you like this type of information, be sure to register for my online history classes, because anybody who's taken them, they tell you we go deep into this information. Okay. And I created the curriculums. I'll show you the binders, because I got binders. There's a ton of information. There's each class, let's see, in Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, there's over 50 articles we reference, probably close to probably about 70 articles. There are numerous books that we reference as well. This article here, this is going to be the last one. I'll do another, I'll do a separate broadcast because I have so much information on this. I do so much research. Where's this one here? The Complicated History of the Woman King. This is from Time Magazine, time.com. I think we have it here. Also, if you like, well, I'll pull up this article. If you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network. We definitely need your support. This helps us do the research, pay the bills, stay on the air. $ the AHN show through Cash App. $ the AHN show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. And if you want to advertise with the African History Network, you can advertise with us as well. Email me at AHNshow at TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AHNshow at TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Or you can go through our website, click on contact. Through our website, you can email us there through the website. Let me find this one here. This dealt with the complicated history behind the Woman King. Okay, this article right here. This is the one I want. This is a really good article written by Laura Zornosa. For Time Magazine, time.com. The Complicated History of the Woman King. Let's see here. All right. Okay, they start out with the beginning of the movie, and okay, Leonard Chuckin. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. The Woman King movie chronicles and triumphs of the trials and triumphs of the Goji and Dahomey, a region in present-day Benin. Leonard Wantchekon, a professor of politics and international affairs at Princeton University, was also a historical advisor on the film The Woman King. He's finishing up a book containing biographies of more than 50 of the real Goji based on interviews with their descendants and communities. Now, here's a scene from the film also. These they're in training to be the ones in the white. They're in training to be Goji warriors. Quote, I think is something which even today would be considered revolutionary because all the training that it took, all the preparation it took, it's actually something that happened. It's not made up. Yeah, that's true. Now, it talks about the conditions. I'm just going to highlight a few things here. You can read it. The conditions that led to the rise of the Goji. They lay out three key points regarding conditions that created the Goji. First, the actual origins of the Dahomey Amazons are cloudy, although the first recorded mention of them dates back to 1729, as I talked about earlier. One theory suggests that the Goji began as a dedicated group of elephant hunters. Wantchekon posits, though, that Queen Hangabe, the twin sister of King Akaba, planted the seed for the idea of the women warriors in the early 1700s. And it goes on and it talks about, okay. So it goes and it lays that out. So read the rest of that there. Okay. It also talks about the role slavery played in the Dahomey kingdom. But the Goji and the Dahomey are not without complexity. In The Woman King, Naniska, the general played by Viola Davis, experiences firsthand the horrors of slavery and works to convince King Gezo to stop participating in the slave trade, or at least to end the tributary status of the Dahomey to the oil empire. But as the investigator journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones pointed out on Twitter before the movie came out, the Dahomey did derive some of their wealth from participating in the slave trade. Yeah, but she needs to do more research too, Nicole Hannah-Jones. She needs to do more research as well. That was one of the problems with the 1619 project also. We talked about that here on this show also. Because it was a lot of, once again, read Fighting the Slave Trade by Sylvian Diop, because it goes deep into this. We have a real misunderstanding of this history. When The Woman King finally opens in 1823, the year Gezo finally freed Dahomey from his tributary status, although the movie acknowledges that Dahomey participates in the slave trade at the time, Naniska is resolved to completely end the film's involvement, a concern she brings directly to the king, who seems to agree, a milestone that did not actually happen until decades later. That's true. So when we went and looked at the real history from Britannica.com, we see that Gezo is going to end Dahomey's involvement in the slave trade decades later. It's not in 1823. A lot of times in these movies, you'll see, and TV shows, because it's the same things with Godfather of Harlem, you'll see timelines collapsed, okay? You'll see timelines collapsed. You'll see real occurrences that take place in different years than it actually took place. And you'll see things out of order. For instance, there was an episode of Godfather of Harlem, which is one of my favorite TV shows, by the way. I'm waiting for season 4 to come back. So the start. I'm waiting for season 4 to come back, or the start, I should say. There was a episode where it dealt with the March on Washington, and they're getting ready for the March on Washington. And Adam Clayton Powell, played by Giancarlo Esposito, who was in the movie School Days, who played Big Brother Almighty, the leader of Gamma Phi. I think it was Gamma Phi. Was it Gamma Phi Gamma in School Days? The fraternity, or the Alphas, whatever they were. He plays Adam Clayton Powell Jr. There's a scene where they are in the planning stage of the March on Washington, and he talks about 4 little girls killed in a church bombing. Well, the 16th Street Baptist church bombing happens on September 15th, 1963. That's roughly 2.5 weeks after the March on Washington, which was August 28th, 1963. They get their timeline screwed up. There's a, when they deal with Malcolm X, there's a scene where Malcolm is delivering the Battle of the Bullet speech, and he's wearing a goatee. Well, Malcolm didn't start wearing a goatee until he goes on his Hajj to Mecca in late April 1964, where he delivers the Battle of the Bullet March 29th, 64. He's clean shaven. When he delivers the Battle of the Bullet, Malcolm is clean shaven. March 29th, 1964, April 3rd, April 4th, 64. He delivers that before he goes on his Hajj to Mecca. He's clean shaven. They have him delivering the Battle of the Bullet with a goatee. And it's like they collapse the timelines. So they screw up the dates, things like that. But that happens. But you get some of the salient points, but you have to really understand history so you don't get confused. The movie came out in 1978, made for TV movie called King, about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his life, starring Paul Winfield as Dr. King and Cicely Tyson as Coretta Scott King. There's a scene, a fictitious scene, that deals with a fictitious meeting between Malcolm X and Dr. King. Now, they did meet in real life, but that was March 26, 1964. They only met for a couple of minutes. This was at the U.S. Senate debate for the Civil Rights Act. But in this made-for-TV movie, King, they have a sit-down, in the movie, they have a sit-down meeting. That's fictitious. And Malcolm has a goatee. Now, the actor who played Malcolm X also played Pretty Tony in the movie The Mac, starring Max Julian. Okay. So they have Malcolm with a goatee, but Malcolm meets Dr. King before he goes on his Hajj to Mecca. He's clean shaven. So they'll screw. This stuff happens in these, movies and historical TV shows. I wish they get the timeline straight at least, but things like this happen. This article here, and then also I'm going to give you the link here so you can register for the online history classes that I teach, because we get deep into this, and this really helps support the African History Network as well. Helps us keep doing what we do and stay afloat and pay the bills, etc. Dr. King met Malcolm X. There's a good article from biography.com, but also a good one from Washington by Deneen L. Brown. She writes some really good articles dealing with history for the Washington Post. Name of this article is Martin Luther King Jr. met Malcolm X just once. The photo still haunts us with what was lost. Now, why do you use Washington Post? Because I pay them each month. I have a subscription. There's a lot of news. There's a lot of news outlets that I have like monthly subscriptions with that I pay to access their information. So when you help support the African History Network, you help us to be able to pay for all these subscriptions. Because I pay National Geographic $25 a month. Britannica.com, I think it's $8.99. I just signed up for. Los Angeles Times is sending me a bill. I just paid Time Magazine. So January 14, 2018. Now, this is when Malcolm meets Dr. King. Malcolm is clean shaven. March 26, 1964. Here's the date right here. U.S. Senate debate for the Civil Rights Act. Malcolm tells Dr. King, I'm throwing myself into the heart of the civil rights struggle, because this is late in the same month that Malcolm officially separates from the Nation of Islam. Malcolm joins the civil rights movement when he leaves the Nation of Islam. Why that's not talked about more, I really don't understand. Because if you watch the documentary, Make It Plain, which is one of the best documentaries on Malcolm, and the documentaries on YouTube, Dr. John Henrik Clark, one of our great Grandmaster Scholar Warriors, is in the documentary. It deals with a meeting that Malcolm had with the civil rights leaders, the big six civil rights leaders. When he leaves the Nation of Islam, they meet at Juanita Poitier's house, who was Sidney Poitier's wife. I think it was Sidney Poitier's first wife. She was black wife. Okay, we're gonna leave that alone. Okay, but they meet at Juanita Poitier's house. Is Malcolm there and other civil rights leaders? Dr. King could not attend, but he sent a surrogate. They met to put out on the table all their grievances so that they can work together. This is in the documentary. That's not talked about, because you have forces that want to keep us at odds with one another, just like there were forces that wanted to keep the oil empire to keep fighting Dahomey so they could provide Europeans with captives. You have forces that want to keep us fighting between the followers of Dr. King, the followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the followers of Marcus Garvey, the followers of Malcolm X, all this stuff. When we really should be one united African people. One aim, one destiny, understanding history. Because if we understand our history, our collective history, it'll cut down on a whole lot of confusion and arguments and all this simple Simon-ass nonsense that just benefits white supremacy, to keep us fighting and arguing with one another, divide and conquer strategies. But Malcolm tells Dr. King that he's throwing all of his effort into, I'm throwing myself into the heart of the civil rights struggle. King would say later, he is very articulate, but I totally disagree with many of his political and philosophical views, at least insofar as I understand where he now stands. But February 24th, 1966, who does Dr. King go meet with? Dr. King and Coretta Scott King go meet with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad at Elijah Muhammad's house in Chicago. The exchange will only last a minute, but the photo remains a haunting reminder of what was lost. They would never meet again before each was assassinated. First Malcolm and Dr. King. They were trying to set up another meeting. Malcolm goes to Alabama, I think it's Selma, in like January 1965. Dr. King is in jail. Malcolm meets with Coretta Scott King. Why isn't that talked about? Because if we see that Malcolm could meet with Coretta and Malcolm wants to meet with Dr. King, and we see that Dr. King had a secret friendship with Muhammad Ali, and one is a Christian and one is a Muslim, and Malcolm, this is one of the most important things. See, this is Pan-Africanism. Malcolm was calling for a unification of the civil rights leaders, even while he was still in the Nation of Islam. So the month before the March on Washington, July 31st, 1963, Malcolm sends a letter to the leading civil rights leaders, including Dr. King, 8 months before their brief meeting on Capitol Hill, March 26, 1964, Malcolm X sent a letter to Dr. King requesting a meeting. He sent them to the big six civil rights leaders, Dr. King and John Lewis and A. Philip Randolph and James Farmer of CORE. The return address was Muhammad's Mosque, number 7, 113 Lenox Avenue. Muhammad's Mosque, number 7, 113 Lenox Avenue, New York, New York. Malcolm X opened the letter with the greeting, "Dear Sir." He called for a united front against racial oppression in the country. When Malcolm was still in the Nation of Islam, Malcolm was calling for a unification of not just the civil rights leaders, but also their followers. Quote, "The present racial crisis in this country carries within it powerful destructive ingredients that soon may erupt into an uncontrollable explosion." Malcolm X wrote. The seriousness of this situation demands that immediate steps must be taken to solve this crucial problem by those who have genuine concern. Before the racial powder keg explodes. A united front involving all Negro factions, elements, and their leaders is absolutely necessary. Malcolm was, while he's still in the Nation of Islam, he's calling for a unification of African American leaders of different factions, including the modern day civil rights movement, including Dr. King and A. Philip Randolph and John Lewis and James Farmer, as well as their followers. He said Malcolm warned that a, quote, "racial explosion is more destructive than a nuclear explosion," citing a recent meeting between President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. Okay. And Malcolm said, "We have to find a common solution to a common problem posed by a common enemy." Malcolm said, despite their tremendous ideological differences between John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev, he said, "It's a disgrace for Negro leaders not to be able to submerge our minor differences in order to seek a common solution to a common problem posed by a common enemy." Malcolm invited Dr. King to a rally that August in 1963 in Harlem, New York, to analyze the race problem and a solution. Malcolm promised to moderate the meeting and guarantee courtesy for each speaker. Malcolm requested that if Dr. King could not attend, then to send a representative, closing the letter with an endearment, "Your brother Malcolm X." Dr. King declined the invitation and did not send a representative. According to the book Malcolm X and the Cross, The Nation of Islam, Malcolm X and Christianity by Louis A. DeCaro Jr. We know the March on Washington took place, the March for Jobs and Freedom. Malcolm attended the March on Washington, called it the Farce on Washington, but then Malcolm joins the Civil Rights Movement the next year. And when you read the Battle of the Bullet, read the entire speech. March 26, 1964, Malcolm is talking about infusing Black nationalism into the modern day civil rights movement to radicalize the civil rights movement. Okay, read the rest of this here because I got to get the hell out of here. Okay. Martin Luther King Jr. met Malcolm X just once. The photo still haunts us with what was lost. Check that out. Here are some of I made notes from me seeing the film today, The Woman King, very briefly, because we'll do we're going to do a series of broadcasts dealing with this. We see African martial arts depicted in the film also, which is fantastic as well. We see them using weapons. We see hand-to-hand combat. We know that martial arts originates in Africa. And we've had Ahati Kalindi Iyi on the show a number of times. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was one of my friends and the master of the African martial arts, Ahati Kalindi Iyi. So we see the hand-to-hand combat, and we know that martial arts originates in Africa. The first fight systems known to man come out of Africa, not China. Okay, it wasn't Shaolin Kung Fu, all right, things like that. No, they come out of Africa. Okay, so King Gezo was problematic when you study the real history of him. He's problematic. I'm totally against any Africans. I was against really the cultural servitude system. I know it served a purpose, but I was against the cultural servitude system. And I don't like to see Africans fighting one another, whether it's in the movies, whether it's for real, etc. Now, there was the character of Malik, who was, this is extremely important. The character of Malik in the film really, his character did not exist, but he's probably a composite character. The reason why is he was half Dahomean and he was half white. His mother was from Dahomey. His mother was sold as a slave in, I think, Brazil. It ended up in Brazil, okay? He's a free person. His mother's dying wish was that he goes to Dahomey to reconnect with his people and to find himself, okay? This is a crucial message for African Americans who've largely been stripped of African history, culture, language, African spiritual systems, our folklore, our mores, African systems of math, our family ties, things like this. He comes to, I'm not going to give, I'm not going to give away the end of the movie. He comes to Dahomey with a Portuguese slave trader. He reconnects basically with Dahomey and his people to a certain extent to find himself. And in reconnecting to Africa, it causes him to change his behaviors, which changes the trajectory of the movie, which has a big impact on the outcome of the movie. But he's able to go to Africa and reconnect with Dahomey, with his people. And this changes the way he thinks, feels, acts, and behaves, which ultimately changes results. There's a lesson in that for African Americans who've largely been taught to hate ourselves, see reality through the eyes of Europeans. We've been stripped of African history, culture, language, spiritual systems, etc. And largely a mentally brain damaged people. There's a lesson in there when we look at Malik. And those who saw the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Then we see at the end of the movie, King Gezo, played by John Boyega, probably did not say this in real life, but it's important at the end of the movie. One of the things movies do that have a historical foundation, they don't just reflect what happened historically to varying degrees with a lot of license, a lot of liberties and creative licenses and things like this. They also have messages that relate to us in present day to shape the way we think, feel, act, and behave in present day, to inspire us to do better, to do more, to reach higher heights. He says something to the effect of African people should be united and stop fighting amongst ourselves, stop fighting each other. Good chance he didn't say that for real, but it's important for us to see that in the movie, because that relates to today. It is true, and it's true throughout our history. Okay, so that's my notes. If you like this type of information, be sure to register for the online history classes that I teach. Visit our website, TheAHNShowNetwork.com, TheAHNShowNetwork.com. And we have the information around the homepage on the website. Click on, just click on register here. Let's see, let's go to it right here. And as soon as you register, you can watch the archive classes. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. So as soon as you register, you can watch the class we just did Saturday. Next class is going to be Saturday, September 24th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Class is on sale, $80, regularly $130. Click right here to register here. It takes you to the next page. And then you just click on, let's see, where do we go here? Okay, it takes you to our Learn World page, and you just click on register here. And as soon as you register, you click right here, enroll. Okay, and it takes you to the next page, and then you can start watching the content. And you can join us in class live. I don't take attendance. You can join us in class live. That's fine. But we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. You can also email us at AHNshow@TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AHNshow@TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So I teach that class, and then the second class I teach is from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. So we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade. We deal with, we start in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase and the Haitian Revolution, because those two events are related. And we deal with history chronologically leading up to the Civil War and Reconstruction, 1861, 1865, Jim Crow era, World War II, World War I, World War II, Great Migration, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement. Okay, so we go through our history chronologically. Each class we go through and analyze approximately a 20-year, 25-year period of history. Okay, that is from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968, and that's at our website also, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So we have the information for the classes. You can register for the bundle pack here of courses also. Okay. You get both classes for $130. That's over a $300 value because there's some bonus content you're going to get from me as well. And if you've taken any of my online classes in the past, email me as well. You can email us through the website. Just click on Contact the African History Network. You get a 50% discount if you've taken any of our online classes in the past. There is a, we have to put this on a homepage at the website, but if you go to shop, our DVD lectures are there, my DVD lectures. Basically, we have a new bundle pack, 15 DVD bundle pack, African History Awakens the African Mind from Mental Death. This is a 15 DVD bundle pack. You get 15 of my lectures. They're on sale $100. It includes 3 of my lectures dealing with the film Black Panther also. So that's at our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and just click on shop. Okay, and we have it there. Has my DVD lectures and some other ones also as well, and a few documentaries also. Out of Darkness, Heavy is the Crown, Out of Darkness documentary also. All right, remember the African History Network, you focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Thanks for staying for this extended broadcast. I had a lot to deal with because this is a deep topic. It's a lot of history. I got more information on Dahomey, more articles, things like this. We just don't have enough time to get through all of this. But this is a really important topic. Too much nonsense, misinformation floating around on social media. None of those people saw the movie. Okay, I have 1 million followers on our fan page, the African History Network. I looked at probably over 100 comments. I lost track of the comments that I saw. Nobody who saw the movie had overall a negative opinion of the movie. Everybody who saw the movie was blown away by it. The only people who had something negative to say were people who didn't see the movie. So what does that tell you? Right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win Wakanda forever.